follow him to Seattle if he doesn't have a plane.
We're ready to go.
Yeah, it's not that, it's the cost. That's-
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Whatcom County Council meeting for September 26, 2017. Would you please call the roll?
Barbara Brenner,
Here.
Red Brown,
Yeah.
Barry Buchanan,
Here.
Todd Donovan,
Here.
Ken Mann,
Here.
Satpal Sidhu,
Here.
Carl Weimer.
Here.
Thank you. Would you please rise and join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Why do I feel an echo? Oh, okay. That's why I felt.
Okay, a couple of announcements. If you have your cell phone with you tonight, would you please either turn it off or put it on vibrate so we don't hear that going off? And if you'll be handing out any paperwork during public hearing or the open session, please make sure our staff gets a copy for our records. We have 18 sets of minutes to approve. I'm not going to read this long list, so hopefully you've all taken a look at that and would entertain a motion. Mr. Brown?
I move approval for items 1 through 7 and 9 through 18.
1 through 7. And so you're just leaving out 8?
Yep.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Discussion? See,
I edited them all, so they're all correct.
okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 7-0. Now I'd entertain a motion to consider item 8.
I'll move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for minutes on item 8. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
1 abstention.
That's 6-0 with Councilmember Brown abstaining.
And were you gone?
He was.
I was gone in the morning.
We'll move into our public hearing. We have audience members who signed up at the back of the room prior to the meeting will be called first and are asked to form a line behind the signs on each side. When you get up to speak, please speak directly into the microphone so everyone can hear you. That we would really appreciate that. We'd also appreciate keep the applause or any boos or anything like that. Please refrain from doing so and let everyone feel safe to testify. Each speaker should state his or her name for the record, and we'll be given 3 minutes to address the council. Council staff will keep track of your time, and they will let you know when you have 30 seconds left to wrap up, and they will tell you when your time is up. And we would appreciate it if you would stop when they announce that. That's about it for the guidelines. We will now consider our first public hearing, which is an ordinance amending Ordinance 2016-049, the First Amendment, to modify the 2017 Whatcom County Unified Fee Schedule. Do we have any staff report?
Good evening, Council. Joe Rutan with Public Works. I will not be giving the staff report, but I'd like to...
You got to write in.
Excuse me, Joe Rutan with Public Works. I will not be giving the staff report, but I'd like to introduce Doug Rainey, who is our new Engineering Services Manager out at the Northwest Annex doing the Engineering Development Review.
Hello, council members. Thank you. This appendix.
Talk really right. These don't work well.
Gotcha.
We're going to get better ones someday.
This appendix is needed to reduce some confusion based on the previous appendix that was included in the UFS. It won't be adding any fees, and we will not be reducing services. And I can answer any questions if there are any.
Anybody have any questions before we open the hearing?
Hold on, I don't think I do, but
349.
just a sec. Where's, this one or the next one?
You can wait till after the public.
Oh, yeah, no, this is okay.
Okay, thank you. If we have questions, we'll call you back up.
Thank you.
We will open the public hearing. No one has signed up for this, but we would love to have you come and testify if you so desire. Anyone like to speak to us on the Whatcom County Unified Fee Schedule? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. What's the wishes of the council?
I'll move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion, Ms. Brenner?
Yeah, if you could come back up, because it looked to me like it was kind of very vague, minor little changes. I couldn't really understand what the big deal was, why we're even having a hearing on it.
Well, it's the unified fee schedule, so any change
Sorry.
needs to come through the council. The previous appendix that was in there did
Right.
not include some services. There was some language that was confusing that didn't match PDS unified fee schedule language,
Okay,
and a UFS that didn't actually exist, and that's been removed.
so it doesn't really change anything, it just, okay.
No.
Okay. Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, all's in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oops, I think this is a roll call, sorry. Please call the roll.
Barbara Brenner,
Yes.
Red Brown,
Yes.
Barry Buchanan,
Yes.
Todd Donovan,
Aye.
Ken Mann,
Aye.
Paul Sadoo,
Yes.
Carl Weimer.
Yes.
That passes 7-0. Our next public hearing is on a resolution approving the Whatcom County 6-year Transportation Improvement Program for the years 2018 through 2023. Do we have any staff report for this?
Joe Rutan with Public Works again. I would direct your attention to the actual resolution beginning on page 455, and remind you that we spent time in the Public Works Committee meeting going over this, and it's very much a continuation of the previous year's 6-year programs with the list of the projects that have come on and off, and I am available for any additional questions.
Ms. Brenner?
Several things. One of them is, I still notice that number, where is it, number, where's the number? It's on page 457, and it's got the road capital construction, and it talks about Smith and Northwest, and I'm still, I don't want a roundabout there. And so it's being vague, so it's not, this doesn't obligate us to it being a
I
roundabout.
believe you're talking about Project R4 on page 457, which is the Slater Road Northwest Drive, and the title of the project is Intersection Improvement. So it
Right.
does not designate whether that's a signal
Okay.
or a roundabout. It's-
That's all I want.
We'll bring
Okay.
the options back to you to choose.
And one other question. The road speed limits in the Lake Whatcom watershed.
Yes.
Which this doesn't really directly have anything to do with
These
that.
are only capital construction projects
Okay.
that wouldn't be related to the speed limit ordinance that will be back in front of you. I was unavailable today because of court hearings.
Oh, okay, because I got calls from people out there, and I'm
Yeah,
going,
we'll-
it's not on our agenda, and I don't know
We'll
why.
be back in front of the Public Works Committee at the next meeting.
Okay.
Any other questions for Joe while we have him? Thank you. We will open the public hearing. There is no one signed up for this public hearing. Would anyone like to speak to us on the 6-year Transportation Improvement Program? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and turn it back to council.
Someone with his hand up.
You need to come forward, please.
Thank you. My concern, I live out on Marine Drive.
You got to give me your name.
Larry Williams. My concern is out on Marine Drive. There's a lot of new bicyclists out there, and although at Smith Gardens there's an improvement, safety improvement for bicyclists, it really doesn't address the lack of space for 2 cars and a bicyclist, 2 lanes and a bicyclist out there. It's an accident waiting to happen. We got too many people drinking, and the combination is just not safe. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Now, I don't know about other roads in the county, but too many people like the view of the bay, and they're traveling out there, and they need more. The bicyclists need more room. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's not in his head.
Yes, Ms. Brenner?
Larry,
Yes.
talk to Joe, because we're working on that area.
Anyone else like to speak to us on the 6-year transportation improvement program? Hearing none, we'll turn it back to council, and I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of all except R3, Horton Road.
All except R3. We have a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve all projects except for R3. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes 7-0. Mr. Brown, what would you like to do with R3?
I move approval for R3 separately.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve R3. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstention.
Okay, that passes 6-0 with Mr. Brown abstaining. Our last public hearing is an ordinance imposing an interim moratorium on the acceptance and processing of applications and permits for new or expanded facilities in the Cherry Point urban growth area, the primary purpose of which would be the shipment of unrefined fossil fuels not to be processed at Cherry Point. We will open the public hearing, and the first three folks is Warren Shea, Dina Jensen, and Sandy Robson.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? My name is Warren Shea. I live in Bellingham. In the last 30 years, almost 9,000 significant oil and gas pipeline-related accidents have taken place nationwide, according to the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. These have resulted in 548 deaths, 2,500 injuries, and over $8.5 billion in financial damages. And we must never forget what happened in our own backyard, the 1999 gasoline pipeline explosion that killed 3 of our young people. And then there's rail transport. Let me share some headlines from just the past few months. August 2nd, 32 train cars carrying hazardous materials derailed near Hindman, Pennsylvania, forcing evacuation of the town. July 1st, train derailment dumps thousands of gallons of crude oil in Plainsfield, Illinois. May 1st, trains collide near Greenwood, Mississippi, causing derailment. April 4th, 322,000 gallons of ethanol released in fiery derailment. Last time I checked, the most important function of government is to safeguard its citizenry. That's what the moratorium is all about, protecting us from dangerous, volatile chemicals, whether they come here by tanker, train, or pipeline. I don't want to die prematurely because of a fossil fuel explosion, and I don't want my friends and neighbors to die either. This is a no-brainer. The moratorium must be extended so that you can put regulations in place that will protect us. Thank you for your efforts.
Dina, Sandy, and then Wendy Harris. Please refrain from applause.
Dina Jensen, Birch Bay. Good evening, council members. I want to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on land that is the traditional territory of the Lummi and Nooksack peoples. May we nurture our relationship with our Coast Salish neighbors and the shared responsibilities to their homelands where we all reside today. I want to thank all of you again who voted to include in the comprehensive plan the study to find legal ways to limit the negative impacts of crude oil, coal, LPG, and LNG gas exports. I'm calling on you now to continue your vigilance in protecting our community from threats to our public safety, health, environment, transportation, and economy by extending the moratorium on permits for new or expanded facilities in the Cherry Point urban growth area for the shipment of unrefined fossil fuels not to be processed at Cherry Point. And I look forward to additional ongoing actions to further protect our community from toxic projects. It is not accurate for people to say that existing regulations at state and federal levels already protect us from the dangers of these toxic products. As an example of just one type of danger we face, the people in Mosier, Oregon were not protected by such regulations when a train derailed there and burst into flames and heavy smoke just last year. Here is an excerpt from a KHQ news report about the derailment the day it happened. In response to the derailment, the city of Mosier issued a sewer emergency advising residents not to flush toilets or run water down sinks or tubs. News outlets in the area are reporting Mosier School is under evacuation with students relocating to the Whatcom campus in the Dalles. An air quality alert has been issued for surrounding areas because of the smoke. People with respiratory issues like asthma or lung disease should stay indoors. State and federal regulations have not protected us in Whatcom County from receiving the same kinds of oil trains into our community. Many of us drive by these trains regularly and live in places near where they park. And such looming danger for Whatcom County and the sensitive ecosystem at Whatcom Cherry Point from trains, vessels, and processing does not include the danger and severe damage caused to the areas where these materials are extracted and the other areas they travel through until they get here, or the dangers in the places these
30
fuels
seconds,
are
please.
burned day in and day out. Really, this is a very small step we are taking in approving this moratorium when we consider the survival of the planet is at stake. We have a lot more to do. Thank you.
Sandy, then Wendy, then Max Perry.
Sandy Robson. I urge council to approve a 6-month extension of the interim moratorium ordinance prohibiting the filing, acceptance, and processing of applications and permits for new or expanded facilities that would facilitate the increased shipment of unrefined fossil fuels out of Cherry Point. The interim ordinance has been vital to providing land use planning policy guidelines which strengthen protection to the critically sensitive marine environment in and around the areas at Cherry Point, Whatcom, as well as to the culturally and spiritually significant properties of Lummi Nation, to protect Lummi treaty rights, and to protect public health and safety during the time period that the Cherry Point amendments had been under review. This interim ordinance is still vital in order to ensure that the legal study examining Whatcom County's powers to limit unrefined fossil fuel exports from Cherry Point, directed by the Cherry Point UGA amendments to the 2016 comp plan, may be completed and the findings reviewed and considered before lifting the moratorium. That is the same study which groups like the Whatcom Business Alliance tried to stop by misrepresenting to the public the intent of the study. I hope after the study is completed that council will look at the possibility of a permanent moratorium at Cherry Point on new unrefined fossil fuel projects. Other counties and cities have taken similar actions. I remember hearing County Civil Deputy Prosecutor Royce Buckingham speak at a 2016 Planning Commission meeting on the Cherry Point amendments in relation to a section about the Magnuson Amendment that had been proposed at that time, saying that he always recommends that the county be in the position of being the ones who sue instead of being in a position to get sued. I don't think we can depend on decision makers working for our county government to agree to fund a lawsuit on behalf of the citizens of Whatcom County, even when it concerns public health and safety, because of those same county officials' personal bias in favor of Cherry Point fossil fuel industry. I feel that our county executive favors fossil fuel industry development at Cherry Point, and that our county prosecutor's office has sometimes, in my opinion, supplied questionable advice on some specific issues related to fossil fuel development at Cherry Point, thereby putting Cherry Point industry above public health and safety. I would much rather our county, which is a prime target for dangerous fossil fuel projects, be in the position of having statutory and code protections in place instead of leaving citizens like myself and most of the audience here tonight being put in a position of asking, begging our county officials to sue on our behalf.
30 seconds,
So for
please.
now, I ask that you approve the interim 6-month interim ordinance. And after the study is completed, I will be asking council to look into the possibility of a more permanent solution to protect public health and safety, the treaty rights of the Lummi Nation, and the critically sensitive marine environment in and around the areas of Cherry Point. Thank you.
Wendy, Max, and then Carol Perry.
Wendy Harris. This hearing's about one thing, safety. The safety of our residents and the safety of our environment. And later on in this hearing, you're going to hear representatives from Cherry Point Industry come here and tell you that they're environmentalists. And they're going to tell you that they provide a very safe work environment. And, you know, I started thinking about this, and here's what's interesting. I'm an environmentalist. I've come and spoken to you many times, but I've never sat here and declared I'm an environmentalist. And I think that's because when you are an environmentalist, you don't have to say it. It's known. It's shown by your actions. And it also follows, if you have to pronounce yourself an environmentalist, it probably means that you're not. It's the same thing with having to proclaim that you're providing a safe work environment. We just heard from prior speakers about all the accidents that are happening. We clearly know that there's no guarantee of safety, no matter how good intentions are and how many procedures are put in place. And finally, if you really are so concerned about the environment and providing such safe work environments, why do you have to sue communities under the Commerce Clause to have your business accepted? In my experience, when you're a green business, communities welcome their arms and they're happy to have you. Nobody wants the oil and fuel businesses in their community, and it's exactly because of safety. So I hope you don't lose sight of that. I also want to say that for me, this issue is very personal. After I moved to the county and bought a house, the railroad put in some expanded infrastructure, and they made the area right by my house a station, and that's where they idle their trains. There's normally 2 trains idling all the time. There's been 3 sometimes. And you know what's just as scary as having open coal cars and having liquid petroleum gas cars idling by you is all the other chemicals that are being carried, which includes chlorine, styrene, fertilizer, and ammonia. So I think that regardless of the outcome of this
30 seconds,
moratorium,
please.
we need to think about what our permanent solutions are going to be. And they're going to have to involve some land use regulations. We need new tactics. Because nobody wants these industries in their backyard, we're not going to be seeing as many of these big projects. What I'm seeing that isn't noticed yet is a lot of little piecemeal growth efforts. They're kind of slipping through the loop. I saw that very recently with Petrograss.
Time.
They put in some new combines, and then a year and a half later, they wanted to supplement that for keeping the old engines on site. That's the kind of stuff that we need to look for. We need to look for the chemicals, and we need to change our SEPA checklist to be more specific. Thank you.
Max Perry, Whatcom County. Listened to you pretty much through the day and in past council meetings on it. And taxes, like Wendy was talking about, raising taxes is high on the bid. So I would ask you to take a look at this moratorium, that you don't the taxes that the industries are paying out there are more significant than you could ever raise from all of us in Whatcom County to make up for that. So I would ask you to look at that and to consider that the wealth, the prosperity of Whatcom County before you consider that moratorium continuing on. Thank you.
Carol, then Robert Earl, and then Wendy Bartlett.
Carol Perry, Whatcom County. As you know, we've been with you, it's been over a year now, as Councilman Donovan and Councilman Weimer offered these amendments at the end of the comp plan. And we've been to all of the hearings, and there's been a number. several with Planning Commission. And, well, I don't have to tell you, you sat there the whole time. And it was really concerning to me, if you would go back and look at the speakers that spoke at each of the hearings, there was always a few names that were at the beginning. And a couple of times I got up and I tried to protest a little bit, and I wanted to thank Dana tonight because she put the time that the doors would open and that people couldn't sign up for one another, because I watched that happen. And I would just challenge you on affairs like this that are so emotional, that perhaps we could make the hearings a little more balanced. I've watched, there's a couple of young men that organize certain people and sign certain people up. And I just think there's a ring that's going through Water Weeks this last week. And I remember Councilman Weimer said, we want to hear from the industries. We want to hear from people. Can you find a way that we can have dialogue that's a little more balanced and not programmed, I guess I'd say, if I was going to be kind about it. But I watched it carefully. And tonight, you know, this afternoon, your critical areas thing went on until about 5 o'clock. Max and I didn't have time to go home. So I said, I'm just going to go. And Dana had the thing up on the door, and I was the first one in the door. And you know, there was already 4 or 5 names on that list. And so I hadn't planned to speak, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention and ask you, be creative and find some ways that we can have dialogue and come and share
30 seconds, please.
in a more fair way. Thank you.
Robert, then Wendy, then Mike Sennett.
Robert Earl. I'm a 45-year resident, Whatcom County. I live out on the Lummi Nation. Honorable council members, tonight, as a voting member of Whatcom County, I urge you to extend the moratorium on permits for unrefined fossil fuel exports. Lifting the moratorium now would allow companies like Williams, BP, SSA, Marine, Kinder Morgan, and Petrogas to immediately apply for permits and obtain vested rights, exempting them from new development regulations. I urge you to protect the citizens and natural resources of Whatcom County from expansions that would allow export of unrefined products like frack gas, tar sands, crude oil, or coal through Cherry Point. Let's keep the refining jobs in Whatcom County at Cherry Point. I have a son that has a career job at BP, and you know, BP's talking about shipping unrefined oils out and getting rid of the workforce, and I'm afraid for his job. And you know, the way the system has worked for years, it's been a good system. I also urge you to support the completion of the legal study related to these matters that are currently underway. Thank you for serving our community.
Wendy, Mike, and then Jessica Spiegel.
Wendy Bartlett, Bellingham, Washington, and I want to speak largely for the voiceless, future generations who cannot speak, those who are not here, as well as other living beings in our entire planet. I urge all of you to do what you can, actually to extend this moratorium to stop permits of allowing additional facilities and fossil fuel exports beyond 6 months, make it permanent, because the future of our planet depends on it. There are endless cases showing that the quality of the air we breathe. I live in the south end of Bellingham, and I've witnessed uncovered coal trains going by. There's coal dust in the air. Our water is the quality of our water is being currently compromised. And I have no children of my own, but I worry about the future of my great-nephew in Anacortes, Washington. He's only 11, and he can't vote. And this reminds me of a time I went to hear a public hearing because of my concerns about the fossil fuel industry and exports and the health of our communities and of our planet. There was a 10-year-old boy from the Nisqually tribe, and he prepared a speech, and it was very articulate. And what really sat with me was that he said, "I'm 10 years old, and I can't vote. And what are you going to do about my future?" I'm 53, but he's only 10. What we do now greatly impacts what happens in the future. Thank you very, very much.
Mike, and then Jessica, and then John Campbell.
Mike Sennett, Bellingham. I signed myself in, and it was after 6. Good evening. Thank you for taking on this important issue again. To start with, I'd like to try and ease the worries of the BP people here. BP returned to profitability in 2016. I guess the moratorium didn't hurt their bottom line. In fact, Oil Sands Weekly, a trade publication from Alberta, reports that, quote, "West Coast refining margins are some of the best in the world, none better than those located in Washington state," unquote. BP is the largest of the 5 refineries in the state with 35% of the refining capacity. I don't see any disadvantage here for BP. Oil Sands Weekly also writes that, quote, "Washington state proves that left-wing tree huggers and industry can peacefully coexist. A strong labor market reduces the level of discontent among its citizens," unquote. Who knew? Maybe the Canadian analysts have heard of the Blue-Green Alliance that is formed here in our state. And maybe we are not so divided as the WBA would like Whatcom County citizens to believe. The moratorium has protected Whatcom County from the hazards of any increase in the movement of fossil fuels in the county and the Salish Sea. Recently, the county got a small lesson in those dangers when an asphalt tanker accident repaved some of the Everson Goshen Road and turned some roadside lawns into little La Brea tar pits. The spill was caused by human error and container failure. Zoom this incident out to a vessel accident in the Salish Sea, and we have a nightmarish scenario beyond remediation, beyond mitigation. The U.S. Navy's series of collisions shows that any such incident results in catastrophic damage. The moratorium has kept vessel traffic to a stable and safe level, and I think that is its most important function. Since the moratorium took effect, several fossil fuel projects have arisen to target the county and Cherry Point. Petrogas wants to increase exports of butane and propane, which would require rail transport of dangerous pressurized gases. It would also result in more ships in the Salish Sea. Williams Island Connector NG pipeline is aimed at Cherry Point or Birch Bay, and this pass-through scheme raises the prospect of eminent domain usage on county landowners. By pausing permits, the moratorium holds these projects at bay so their threat level can be determined. Thus, the wisdom of enacting the moratorium is proven. And I have heard the legal study the county wisely commissioned should
30
be
seconds,
finished
please.
sometimes in the next 6 months. This study will provide the county with solid guidance going forward. It would be short-sighted and wasteful of tax dollars to open the permit process now with completion in sight. I want to thank this council for protecting Whatcom County, and thank you for representing me and my family.
Jessica, then John, then Anna Miller.
Good evening. My name is Jessica Spiegel, and I represent Western States Petroleum Association. My members include the 5 refineries in the state of Washington, as well as BP and Phillips 66 specifically. One mentioned earlier today was about taxes, and we paid $216 million worth of taxes. We have one of the highest B&O tax rates in the state of Washington. And we fund the oil spill program, the spill prevention portion of it, as well as the MACA tax, which has allowed Puget Sound to be one of the safest waterways in the United States with one of the lowest incidents of spills in the U.S. for ports. Our members have concerns about the continued extension of the interim ordinance imposing a moratorium on the export of unrefined fossil fuels, which does include byproducts of the refineries, as you know. The continuation of the moratorium with no foreseeable end appears to limit the commerce of certain types of commodities, which has a preference for one type over another, which may violate federal and state laws, as you know. The purported intent behind the moratorium to preserve jobs within Whatcom County is in opposition to a business decision needs to plan ahead in how you will structure your business. With regard to the business stability of any industries in this kind of area, it's really hard to plan when you know that you have such antagonistic policies against your business. Thank you.
John, Anna, then Steve Gary.
John Campbell, Whatcom County District 3. I would like to thank the council for taking the time to research and understand that increased pipelines in Whatcom County will not preserve Cherry Point jobs. Thank you.
Anna, then Steve Gary, then Jessica Zimmerl.
Hi, my name is Anna, and I study environmental policy at Western. I'm here today to ask that the moratorium on permits for exports of unrefined fossil fuels be extended. Extending the moratorium is of interest to all citizens of Whatcom County. Expanding fossil fuels pose dangerous risks to our community and threaten both the people and natural resources of Whatcom County. In addition to protecting people and natural resources, the moratorium will continue to protect local jobs, which risk being outsourced with expanding export markets. Preserving current jobs at Cherry Point is important, as well as minimizing the risk of having current jobs replaced being equally important. Of further interest to the citizens of Whatcom County is the economy. Despite the existing moratorium in place at Cherry Point, the Bellingham Herald reported last week that compared to the previous year, Whatcom County GDP rose 1% in 2016. The category of durable goods was also reported to have risen 10%, and construction rose 6.8%. This goes to show that it is possible to protect Whatcom County's precious natural environment while also promoting economic vitality. Until more conclusive results on the harmful impacts of fossil fuels are provided via legal study, halting permits for future fossil fuel exports is necessary. This will secure a healthier and safer community, as well as jobs and economic prosperity for the people of Whatcom County. The council has chosen to protect the people, resources, and jobs of Whatcom County before, and tonight, in the interest of the people of Whatcom County, I'm asking that you do it again. Thank you.
Steve, Jessica, then Alyssa Barton.
Thank you, Council, for this opportunity to provide comments once again. My name's Steve Gary. I'm a retired refinery worker, retired refinery union president. I now volunteer with the Blue-Green Alliance of Washington State. I appreciate very much the Council's support up to this point for planning language that would prohibit the export of crude oil from Cherry Point without otherwise restricting the shipment of finished products from those facilities. You've heard me talk about this from a union perspective, the perspective of the union that represents the majority of refinery workers in the United States. You've heard me talk about it as a way to try to prevent process units from being shut down prematurely or unnecessarily so that the facility can be turned into an export facility, which is something that certainly benefits the corporation at times, but not our community and not those workers. And so we seek to prevent it if we can. There's another reality that we're kind of wrapped up in this. It also, when the moratoriums like this are in place, it also tends to force an employer who wants out for any reason, and those reasons may come up as we transition to clean energy. It tends to force them to sell those process units to someone who will run them. These corporations are generally loath to simply shut those facilities down. That tends to trigger other regulations that require them to spend an awful lot of time and money cleaning up and those sites, remediation and the like. That's something that we will want to have happen, of course, at some point in the future, but we don't necessarily want to go there prematurely. And so crude export actually helps this community and helps those workers in a number of ways. I'd continue to ask for your support in the future for this kind of language prohibiting crude export again without otherwise restricting the shipment of finished products. Help us support those jobs as long as it's reasonably practical to do so. Thank you.
Jessica, then Alyssa, then Alex Rammel.
Hello, thank you for your time tonight. My name is Jessica Zimmerly, and I am the Program and Outreach Director at Earth Ministry. We're a statewide organization, and we organize faith communities on environmental issues. And I want to share the concern of our membership around the safety of our communities and also protection of all of creation. People of faith in Whatcom and beyond, our members all across the state, we are all bringing our values to this conversation, right? And the values that I'm talking about are responsibility, our legacy, justice for all, and stewardship. So meaning that we keep our air clean, our water clean, and our neighborhoods safe for current and future generations. Personally, I'm really invested. I came up from Seattle for this, but my god babies live just down the street. And I just think they're the cutest little nuggets. Here they are. And I just, to think about increased amounts of volatile fuel going through their neighborhoods by their schools fills me with fear for them. And I have a moral responsibility to speak up because, again, they can't and they deserve better. So I thank you for taking the first step and having this interim moratorium. I ask that you please do extend it and that we take advantage of this opportunity to move towards a clean future that's innovative and that works for all of us. So thank you very much.
Alyssa, Alex, and then John Anderson.
Hi, good evening. My name is Alyssa Barton. I'm here as a concerned member of the public who enjoys recreating and paddling in and around Puget Sound. And I'm also here on behalf of Puget Soundkeeper Alliance. Puget Soundkeeper Alliance is a grassroots organization founded in 1984 with over 4,000 members, supporters, and volunteers. Our mission is to protect and preserve the waters of Puget Sound. Thank you for hosting this public hearing and for your continued work to help protect our communities from the threats of expanded and new fossil fuel infrastructure at the Cherry Point urban growth area. We support the continuing moratorium on new and expanded fossil fuel facilities in the urban growth area and a long-term solution. The threats of new and expanded fossil fuel infrastructure at Cherry Point are multifold, particularly since the federal government lifted the ban on fossil fuel exports. We all know that fossil fuels and their byproducts can release carcinogenic chemicals into our environment. Oil transport by rail across our state poses risk of derailments, spills, and explosions. Bomb train explosions are on the rise across the country. More crude oil was spilled in 2014 than in all years from 1975 to 2013. More crude oil is being transported across our country now than at any time in our history. Train derailments pose a huge risk to our communities, particularly those most vulnerable to toxic environmental pollution. Continuing this moratorium protects our communities from these dangers. Oil transportation by sea is another serious risk threatening our communities and our waters. Recent studies report that the risk of an oil spill in the Salish Sea will increase dramatically in the next few years by 168%, or even more, at least 7-fold if the Kinder Morgan pipeline project moves forward as projected in British Columbia. An oil spill in Puget Sound or off Cherry Point could have a devastating impact on local fish and wildlife species, including our southern resident killer whales. There are now only 76 left in Puget Sound since the death of J52 was confirmed just a few days ago. So thank you. Thank you for holding the line and for continuing this protective moratorium. You are leading the way in Washington. Under similar threats, others like Tacoma are considering similar measures. Their city council will soon also be considering
a similar pause on new and expanded fossil fuel infrastructure in their Tacoma tide flats. So in closing, thank you for your leadership.
Alex, and then John, and then Carl Garrison.
Good evening, Council. Alex Rammel, Stand.Earth, located here in Bellingham. In September of 2010, there were 6 proposed coal export terminals in Washington and Oregon. As of this morning, with a decision on a critical permit by the Washington State Department of Ecology, there are 0 left. I thought about trying to get a bottle of champagne into these chambers and decided against it. But I'm sure there would have been lots of folks ready to crack that bottle. The 100% failure rate of these projects suggests that there's a problem in the way that these regulations are working in our state. If we're never going to allow unrefined fossil fuel export projects to happen, then, and I don't think we should, then we should update the rules to say that they're never allowed. Holding open the possibility that we might and a long public process is unfair, it's confusing, it's divisive, and as we've observed in this community, and it requires community members that are rightly opposing those projects to put time, hundreds, sometimes thousands of hours into stopping those problems rather than working on solutions. So I applaud your leadership that you've shown in moving in the direction, and continuing this moratorium is an important step in that process. I don't think this community would ever have allowed a coal export terminal. I don't think that we'll ever allow an expanded crude by rail facility, knowing what we know now about oil trains, or a crude oil export project. I doubt that this community would allow a fracked natural gas pipeline to run from one part of Canada to another part of Canada through the heart of our farmland. These might nominally be allowed under the old code and under the right circumstances, so permit applications have to be accepted and processed. But practically, those circumstances won't ever happen. We can, will, and should block unrefined fossil fuel export because it's bad for the Salish Sea, it's bad for the climate, and it's bad for local jobs in our economy. That's why we were able to submit more than 1 million petition signatures to the governor to that effect earlier this spring. The public is opposed, the science is straightforward, and the economics is actually pretty simple. Stopping unrefined fossil
30 seconds, please.
Stopping unrefined fossil fuel export is clearly the right and I think inevitable outcome in this state. And Whatcom County is leading the way on a smarter process that reaches that conclusion more fairly. Thanks, and keep up the good work.
John, and then Carl, and then Joe Murphy.
Good evening. My name is John Anderson. I'm the Health, Safety, and Environmental Lead at the Phillips 66 Refinery in Ferndale. Phillips 66 appreciates the time and attention this council has given in consideration of whether or not to extend this ordinance for moratorium. Phillips 66 opposes the ordinance, and we request the council not extend the moratorium. We believe the moratorium raises potential constitutional questions related to altering competitive position of Cherry Point businesses as compared to other operating businesses in other parts of Washington and elsewhere. We are also concerned about factual inaccuracies in the moratorium related to the definition of unrefined fossil fuel, which is inclusive of other forms of energy that are in fact refined. Additionally, we question whether the council has the authority to use its zoning power to regulate and favor commodities and to regulate where we sell our product. Not only does this present constitutional concerns, but it presents questions about the powers the legislature has chosen to grant the county. The effect of the moratorium will limit market-based business decisions and activities through imposition of restrictions that competitors in neighboring counties and beyond are not subject to. We are concerned that the moratorium calls into question the future economic viability of operating in Whatcom County, and rather than preserving jobs within the county, that it actually may in fact put the livelihood of employees at risk. The Ferndale Refinery has long been a respected and contributing member of this community. Since 1954, the refinery has manufactured products in a safe and reliable manner and has remained in operation because we were able to make business decisions and investments that created growth and profitability. Those business decisions were enabled by partnership with this community. When businesses work with the community to develop mutually beneficial solutions to complex problems, the interests of the public is best served. Our record of commitment reflects our desire to cultivate a community where businesses, residents, elected officials, public servants, educators, nonprofits, and others can work together to preserve and enhance everything about what we love where we live. In light of these things, we are asking that you consider disapproving extending this moratorium, thereby preserving businesses of Cherry Point and maintaining their competitive abilities. Thank you.
Carl, and Joe, and then Brian Walkenhauer.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am Carl Garrison. I'm a professional engineer, and this moratorium, in my view, is bad for business and jobs, and it will cause generally higher gas prices. We already have 67 cents plus cents a gallon on every gallon of gas tax, and it just gets tiresome to pay that high gas bill every month. The high gas prices that we eventually get from this kind of regulation or this moratorium and excessive regulation hurts the people that we want to protect the most, and that's usually the poor. If you stop construction and expansion improvements at these refineries, they get less efficient over time compared to their competitors, and you'll eventually, the end game is to drive them out of the area. And while that sounds good to some, the increased burden on logging and on taxes on everyone else in the area are unintended consequences that always seem to come about. And so be careful what you wish for when you extend the moratorium, and I would just encourage you to please end it and find a way to make the oil industry work in this area. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Joe, then Brian, and then Eddie Yuri.
Thank you, members of the council. My name is Joe Murphy, and I've been a resident in Whatcom County for 20 years. And I'm a licensed professional engineer, and I'm an employee of Phillips 66 Ferndale Refinery. I do want to say that I find it kind of ironic that some of those that are so much against fossil fuels are using fossil fuels in nearly every product. Pretty much all products that they use are directly or indirectly related or received to them by fossil fuels. And even come up here to speak wearing a backpack that probably materials originated out of an oil refinery and a Dow chemical plant. But that's not what I want to talk about. My 25-year career has mostly been in the project management and execution of heavy industrial projects. In that role, it is vital to understand the process by which projects get proposed, developed, funded, permitted, engineered, and built. And to do so, it is necessary to have a working knowledge of the business and how a corporation makes business decisions. It is with that background that I want to express my concern and disagreement with the subject moratorium. First, there is already in place a comprehensive and rigorous process by which proposed projects are developed, reviewed, and approved to ensure that proposed projects meet or exceed the requirements of existing laws and regulations. This process involves numerous agencies on the federal, state, and county level, as well as other community partners. These agencies include the EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Department of Ecology, the Northwest Clean Air Agency, the Department of Natural Resources, and the various departments of Whatcom County. And the permitting process also has points that trigger a public review and reviews by other community members. Therefore, this moratorium is wholly unnecessary in its stated purpose, and it serves to override or make null the project permitting process, which is currently codified in law at the federal and state level and county levels of jurisdiction. My second disagreement, and I've got many, but I'm only going to list two. My second disagreement with the moratorium is the stated notion that the moratorium is saving jobs by preventing the current industrial sites being reduced to terminals. This might sound nice to those that are not aware of how a business such as a refinery or a corporation that runs and maintains several industrial assets operates, but it is simply not true and not based on any fact whatsoever. All of these Cherry Point industries invest hundreds of millions of dollars into these facilities to keep them operating safe, clean, efficient, and productive. It is not a business goal or a favorable outcome for the investment to shut down these facilities and downgrade their use to only that of a terminal, which produces a lot less cash flow for the business. The only reason you see terminals where there used to be a refinery is because the refinery was unable to stay viable as a refinery, and somebody
30 seconds,
repurposed the
please.
remaining useful assets to a terminal to keep some value from the site. The reason for an industrial site losing its viability is because its corporate sponsors made a business decision to no longer invest in that site to keep it viable. And people don't realize that these Cherry Point industries have to compete for corporate dollars to invest in that, and we're involved in that process daily on convincing the corporation to convince it to invest in our facility, to keep it clean, safe, productive, and operating in this community. And one of the big factors in getting them to provide, to invest in us, is do we have a community partner? And when a facility loses its community partner, that community can quickly lose the jobs, the economic partner, and the community partner that it has in that corporation and that business. So I urge the council to not extend the moratorium because it overrides current laws and regulations governing the project permitting process, and it threatens jobs by sending a signal to existing and future businesses that Whatcom County is unfriendly to business. Thank you very much. Sorry for going over.
Brian, then Eddie, and then Joe Wilson.
Brian Walkenauer, Whatcom County resident.
Yeah, Brian, sorry, yeah.
Correct, thank you. Council, I urge you to not extend the moratorium out at Cherry Point. I want to point out that the businesses at the Cherry Point Industrial Zone pay more than $200 million in taxes each year. These funds are used to pay for everything from schools to public safety, as well as the government services that we're all partaking in right now. I want you to think about if the jobs at Cherry Point and the companies out there are affected, how are you going to replace that tax revenue to ensure that we can continue the schools, the public safety, and the government services that we currently have today? I'm also concerned about the legal ramifications of the moratorium as it affects the commerce of the companies that do business in the Cherry Point Industrial Zone, and how those legal ramifications may affect the county residents in Whatcom County. Thank you.
Eddie, Joe Wilson, and Jack McBride.
Good evening, council members. I'm here to urge you, of course, to extend this moratorium once more, and when the legal study undergoing is completed, please take further action to the greatest extent of your powers to protect public health and safety, our economy, environment from potential proposals to export unrefined fossil fuels, not processed at Cherry Point, but sent on overseas to Asia in direct competition with the existing refineries and industries at Cherry Point. Of course, we want to keep them here, these refineries, as long as we depend on their products, hold them here and hold them to the highest standards of process safety and pollution control. And of course, as a collective global effort, we want to invest in new infrastructure that creates good jobs and reduces our reliance on fossil fuels, helping us transition to resilient energy systems. And that's why across Washington state right now, labor unions and environmental advocates are working together in coalition both to stop new oil terminals and to create jobs in the clean energy economy. I do have a small suggestion of a change in the existing ordinance before you pass it, bear with me, where it says, "Be it further ordained that for the purposes of this ordinance, the definition of unrefined fossil fuel includes, but is not limited to all forms of crude oil," etc. This is where it lists off other products that are indeed can be considered refined. It says, excluding those that are the byproduct of refinery processes in the Cherry Point UGA. As it had been previously motioned to underline the term unrefined in the ordinance, I'd also suggest underlining this statement, because we've seen consistent misrepresentation on purpose from Ms. Brady of British Petroleum and others saying that this moratorium also applies to refined fuels. It doesn't. In fact, the moratorium in effect actually gives the existing refineries exclusive access to export refined products through their piers and prevents refined products from other places from routing through piers, with the exception, of course, of Petrogas, who before the moratorium was in place has started exporting propane from other states in competition with our refineries. So I think underlining this term for sake of clarity would be helpful, and just so everyone here is clear, byproducts of refinery process at Cherry Point are not are exempted from this moratorium. So why are they saying this? Why are we hearing from the WBA and others that
30 seconds,
that
please.
this project is going to, that it's threatening jobs, that it's threatening funding for education? Well, they're exploiting a situation here. And what this has to do with is the appraised value of their properties. If their property values are reduced, they'll be able to pay less taxes to the county. That's their real aim. That's what they want to do. And they're trying to blame you and blame environmental regulations for something which is not the cause and not the case. Their properties are just as valuable as ever, in fact, even more so because of this moratorium. So we shouldn't stand for this, we shouldn't allow this, and I'm glad that you're not doing so. Thank you.
Joe, Jack, and then Ronna Lurch.
Joe Wilson, Vice President of Peterson Brothers. We're a heavy industrial steel fabricator located here in Bellingham. If you drive by one of the refineries and you see the steel structures that are in those refineries, most of that steel was fabricated by my company. It's all fabricated here in Bellingham. We have 50 employees at our facility at Iron Gate, and we have several hundred employees working for it, subcontractors and suppliers. We are against the moratorium. We would like to see the county work with the refineries to make it a better environment for them to do business in this county so that they can bring more jobs to the county. They have been a very good neighbor. They spend millions of dollars on air pollution control and water pollution control. They contribute millions of dollars to nonprofits in the county that we all support, I believe. They also pay very good wages to employees that not only work at the refineries but off-site, like at my company, who spend a lot of money in the community, pay a lot of taxes. And as Joe Murphy said earlier, the decisions on these refineries are not made here in Whatcom County. They're made by the corporations who look to where to invest their dollars. If we're an anti-refinery county, an anti-business county, and they're going to invest their money somewhere where it's not, where they don't have to put up a fight to do business like they are having to do here now. And I know some of you want to raise taxes in this county, but I would like you to look at the equation of where you would have to go with taxes if these refineries quit operating in the county, because I think the next county council meeting after you announce that, you better rent out Civic Stadium for the amount of people that will come to that with an opinion. Thank you very much.
Jack, and then Ronna, and then Abe Jacobson.
My name is Jack McBride. I'm from Bellingham. I want to speak on behalf of a continuation of the moratorium. Since the last time the County Council considered this issue, political developments in British Columbia have raised the urgency for Whatcom residents. The new BC government is opposed to the extension of the Trans Mountain Pipeline and to more fossil fuel shipments through their territorial waters. This is why Kinder Morgan wants to double the size of their existing pipeline coming down through Sumas to ship tar sands oil. And the Williams Pipeline Company wants to construct a new pipeline to ship fracked oil in a tunnel under the Strait of Georgia, somewhere in the vicinity of Blaine, to a proposed export terminal on Vancouver Island. Meanwhile, we have a new U.S. Secretary of the Interior from Montana, who has vowed to facilitate increased coal shipments from his home state to overseas customers. That means more coal trains dumping their polluting dust across Washington and up through Bellingham, providing that they can bully us into letting them build the necessary docks and piers at Cherry Point. Contrary to the lies that have been so widely promulgated, expanding the export capacity of Cherry Point and/or the Intelco piers will provide very few new jobs for Whatcom residents. And in the end, more piers will probably mean that the refineries here will be shut down, with the loss of many good union jobs that pay reasonable wages. But the real losers will be all the marine life and the people whose livelihoods depend on fishing and tourism. The vastly increased tanker traffic down through the Rosario Strait between Orcas and Lemmy Islands will disrupt the feeding and breeding patterns of the marine mammals, such as whales and orcas. Just one large spill of tar sands oil would destroy our offshore waters for generations. Turning Whatcom County into a major fossil fuel transit hub is a terrible deal for all the living creatures in our region. Don't let Texas, Oklahoma, and Montana companies ruin our heritage and our lands. Thank you.
Rana, Abe, and then Carol Jacobson.
Thank you for this opportunity to have a public hearing. I wouldn't mind having a dialogue, but this is a public hearing, and I'm so happy to be here. And then secondly, I'll just say we are not an anti-business county. That's for sure. You've already heard testimony about that, how well we are doing. So, I live in Everson, right around the corner from that tar oil spill. It was kind of large and kind of shocking to the community, but it's all better now, and they're going to have a nice lawn back soon. The current Cherry Point moratorium is a temporary fix, and I urge you to extend it until the study and your own work is done. Please be thinking about the future and what you will do when that study is completed. That's the important thing. We need an ordinance that protects the public safety and the ecology of our region. This might mean taking a stronger stance with industry and what can be allowed. Money should not be a driving force behind your decisions. Transportation and air quality impacts must be taken into consideration. I know from people who live in this area that trains are idling on the tracks. This is detrimental to residents' sleep and overall health because breathing is affected by exhaust fumes 24/7. You'll hear testimony from workers and managers of the Cherry Point Industries who will tell you this is about jobs and what a beautiful asset and benefit they are to the community. It's not about jobs, but about industry calling the shots in local communities. You may also hear, and you have heard from a community member who last time talked about how those of us who speak with these ideas need to be educated. I truly hope you realize the ignorance of that statement. Yeah, I want good work for the citizens of the county, and everybody that I speak with and for and talk with want that also. Work that's clean and safe, work that promotes a better standard of living by providing a living wage. People want to work. This region has much to offer industry that provides these things. Look for them, seek them out, invite them to come and see our county and what's available here for them. A council member once asked me, why would Elon Musk want to build here in this county? And I was a little flat-footed and couldn't answer that, but surely I went away and thought, surely he must be kidding. With Vancouver to the north, Seattle to the south, and this county. Surely, think about it. Get over the polluting industry's propaganda. Get us some good industry we can all support. Jobs are jobs. I am for jobs. Thank you so much for my time.
Abe, and then Carol, and then Tony Larson.
Good evening. My name is Abe Jacobson, and I live in Whatcom County, Bellingham, District 1. And I'm here to support extension of the moratorium so that the newly seated council in 2018 will have completely adequate information to judge these very complicated issues. I agree with previous speakers that this is not really about jobs. No business is going to walk away from a sunk investment in multi-billion-dollar facilities simply because we did not allow it to do a small expansion. All jobs currently at Cherry Point can be protected within the confines of its current operations as long as export is allowed for refined products produced at the refinery. British Petroleum is beginning to flex its muscles here in an ugly way, and I don't like intimidation. They gave to the county executive in 2015. They've already maxed out to 3 candidates in port and council races here this year. And we're hearing the threats from their representatives tonight that, oh, if you don't give us what we want, if you're not business friendly, then we'll take our jobs. I don't believe that, and don't become intimidated. Thank you.
Carol, then Tony Larson, and then Kent Murray.
Carol Jacobson of Bellingham. This is a case of great minds think alike. Someone just stole my speech. However, I would like the moratorium to continue. Of concern to me is that when I walk neighborhoods, and I do a lot of that at this time of the year, both in wealthy and in poor neighborhoods, everybody is for the moratorium continuing. And that, I think, is very hopeful. Another issue of concern to me is that BP, British Petroleum of all companies, I hate to say this, are dropping $1,000 a pop on candidates in our local elections. And I think this is an unfair, illegal influence that we need to be very aware of. Thank you.
Tony, Kent, and then Dirk Vermeeren. Sorry.
Good evening, Tony Larson with the Whatcom Business Alliance. And I didn't plan on making any remarks tonight, don't have any prepared remarks, but and partly because this debate has been going on for about 1.5 years, and I don't think I've heard anything tonight, any new opinions. I don't think there's new information that's come about. I don't expect that your opinions have changed on things. There certainly hasn't been anything that's happened since the last time this moratorium was renewed since now. But what I do want to share is that this is about a lot of things. Everybody's opinion in here, as they're expressing it, are valuable. You know, we are a community. I love this community. I was born in Bellingham, raised in Whatcom County, finished school here in Whatcom County. I work here in Whatcom County, raised my kids in Whatcom County. And there's nobody that has a license on the quality of life and those kinds of things. You know, everybody that lives here wants to stay here. But one thing I would take exception to is that there are 10,000 families in Whatcom County that rely specifically on the support of Cherry Point jobs. And those jobs aren't just regular jobs. The average income in Whatcom County is approximately $42,000. The average income of those 10,000 families exceeds $100,000. You know, at a time when home prices are skyrocketing, and in fact, I think Wall Street 24/7 listed Bellingham as one of the top 50 worst places in the country to live. If you peel back those numbers, we know that Bellingham is a great place to live. But I think what it really does say is that it's a really terrible place to live if you don't have a job and you don't own a home, and that really, you know, speaks to the next generation. So the Whatcom Business Alliance we're not a supporter of fossil fuels. We're a supporter of good partners, businesses that are following the law, obeying the rules, doing the right thing. We support their ability to do that. And we would support any business in Whatcom County, whether it's a business focused on renewable energies or anything else. And so I guess one thing I know this isn't a dialogue and interaction, but tonight after all the speakers are done, you guys are going to have an opportunity to weigh in. And I would just ask you, earlier on in the process, you said that you wanted the industries to communicate. You wanted to reach out and communicate. And today I came to the committee of the whole, and I know that you guys met in executive session relating to the legal ways that you could limit the exports of fossil fuels. And I understand that you have the legal right to meet in executive session.
30 seconds, please.
But typically that's done when there's pending litigation or something else. This is a study you're reviewing to make policy, and it just seems to me that it would be a good act of faith if we had that dialogue transparently as well. As I said, there's 10,000 families that rely and are really concerned about what's going on in Cherry Point. And I think that they have a right to sort of understand where you're coming from. And I think it would be valuable for you to hear where they're coming from. The industries, you know, big corporate industries, well, they've been community partners for the last 5.5 decades, 6
Time.
decades. So anyway, I just wish that you would respond to that and just give folks from the industry perspective an idea of what this process is going to look like moving forward.
Kent, then Dirk, and then Gwen Hunter.
Good evening, Council. My name is Kent Murray, and I have lived at the top of U Street Hill for 23 years. Okay, it is about the money. I couldn't live in this hyper-expensive Bellingham without industry. I like what I do. And again, I've asked you this before. Do you guys like what you do? I really enjoy going into work every day. That's a rare commodity, and that's because I work in an industry where innovation is king. Most of the projects I work on continuously improve the process, safety, environmental, and economics. I am proud of my accomplishments. Presently, I commute to work in an electric car, but don't be fooled, it partially runs on coal. I don't drive this car for environmental reasons. I drive it because it's economical. And to my point, let Whatcom County industry grow so that Whatcom County can prosper. I do support the Cherry Point industry. Thank you.
Dirk, then Gwen, and then Paula Rotondi.
Good evening, council members. As a 30-year executive, recently retired from the oil industry. As a 30-year executive and recently retired from the oil industry, current resident of Whatcom County, we urge you to extend the current moratorium on permits for unrefined fossil fuels export projects. Lifting the moratorium now, before your legal study is complete, will undermine the progress as we as a community have made to date. Oil and chemical industry-related events over the last 6 months are proving that unmonitored industry growth will have long-term negative impact on the residents of the local community. Gulf Coast communities are suffering from the pollution and spills caused by oil and chemical industries hit by recent storms. Similarly, increased shipments of coal and oil-related products through the communities along the Columbia River have resulted in incidents with long-term implications. Are we and our local oil and chemical operations prepared to avoid similar catastrophes in the Cascadia Fault earthquake? We as a community must take the lead and develop a long-term vision and implementation plan with policies that benefits all constituents. Deferring to industry or the federal government the right policy that considers the impact on our local community is not an option. We support your actions to protect the constituents and natural resources of Whatcom County from industry expansions where long-term risks to the community outweigh the short-term benefits of a few non-local shareholders. Thank you for allowing me the time.
Dirk, could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, it's Dirk Vermeeren.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Gwen, then Paula, and then Ronald Colson.
Hi, I'm Gwen Hunter from Squalicum Valley in Bellingham. First of all, I want to thank you for considering a future that recognizes the deadly impact of fossil fuels on our planet and our need to phase out their use instead of plowing ahead full steam with their temporary growth. And we all know it's temporary. It's the last gasp with these companies. Even the countries that Canada and Britain hope to ship them to plan to end their use. They're going solar. I support Cherry Point jobs. They keep saying these signs that say I support Cherry Point jobs. I support them. But these facilities have kept us moving and warm for generations, and the workers there deserve our deep appreciation. I have a family member who's worked there for years. Hard work. She wears a brace thing that will catch her if she falls, and she goes way up high and is hot, does hard physical work. But the problem is that we now know for sure that dead dinosaur energy is killing us. And I don't want my grandchildren and their grandchildren to go the way of the dinosaurs. It's crazy. We know a lot more now. And also the applicants who want to use Cherry Point, BP, Kinder Morgan, Petrobras, et cetera, present a huge threat to our fishing industry. And this industry certainly doesn't need any more threats. The British still haven't adequately cleaned up the Gulf waters. It's impossible. So I know that a spokesperson for BP said that they really needed to know that being held in limbo was hard on them because they didn't know how to make decisions. I would encourage you to make the interim moratorium permanent, and then they would know how to make decisions. This shouldn't affect current employees, and it might eventually, hopefully, encourage Cherry Point engineers. We need engineers to look into how this facility, if it's possible, it may not be too clean enough, but how they can retool in order to contribute to the clean and renewable energy future that is inexorably and quickly coming. The hurricane hit areas...
30 seconds, please.
Okay, the hurricane hit areas down in Florida that ran on solar were up and running right away after the hurricane. The other areas, fossil fuel areas, are still hurting. So that's where we gotta go. Thank you.
Paula, Ronald, and then Yoshi Ravel.
Paula Rotundi. The first responsibility of every level of government is to protect public health and safety. And that's the first reason that I support extending the moratorium. New fossil fuel pipelines and unrefined fossil fuel export projects increase the risks of more life-threatening spills, fires, and explosions along all stages, from unearthing to transporting to burning. The second reason for my support for the moratorium extension is that the moratorium only affects new permits for fossil fuel projects not processed at Cherry Point. The moratorium protects Cherry Point jobs because it prohibits new projects that would send unrefined, unprocessed fuel overseas. The moratorium does exactly what all those signs littering Whatcom County tell us to do. The moratorium preserves Cherry Point jobs. Whatcom County has always recognized the important economic contribution that Cherry Point industries make by providing refined fuels, an essential commodity today, and by providing several hundred high-paying jobs. And Whatcom County has always recognized the importance of Cherry Point's highly skilled workers who live among us and upon whom we all depend for the safe operation of these now necessary but dangerous facilities. Surely today's Cherry Point workers must hope that their own children will have similarly high-paying jobs in a less dangerous industry. For the sake of everyone's children, Whatcom County must work to attract clean energy industries like wind and solar. That's where job growth is and where it will continue to be. Finally, the third reason I support extending the moratorium is that we can only avoid climate change's worst impacts is if we do not develop any new fossil fuel projects. Climate change is underway. It is accelerating.
30 seconds, please.
Worse hurricanes, wildfires, droughts. We must act now to limit climate change because it's harming health and safety now, and it will harm all future generations. Thank you for your service on the council.
Ronald, Yoshi, then John Holstein.
Good evening. My name is Ron Colson, Whatcom County. I would like to ask you to extend the moratorium and pursue making a permanent fix. Now, what is that permanent fix? Well, I've heard a lot of different items tossed out tonight. One of them was that they wanted more balanced discussions. Gee, we're going to either, survive as a race or we're going to destroy the race on the planet, and we're going to balance this discussion. I don't know what, we're going to destroy the human race in a longer period of time if we just do some fossil fuels? No, this is not a time for a balanced discussion. I've heard lots of talk about the big taxes and the donations to the, philanthropic donations made by the industries. That's great, terrific. How much bribe money do we need in order to bring in industry? Because we could go to Hanford, I'd be willing to bet you, and we'd let them scoop up all of their radioactive waste and pile it up. How about in Linden? And I bet they'd pay us a lot of taxes and give us lots of donations to do that. But I don't think that's what we want in order to raise taxes. I've heard people talk about that this is raising constitutional issues. Well, this industry is so lawyered up already that, golly, put them to work. If it's a constitutional problem, then make them earn their pay and take it to court. Why haven't they? Because they say, well, it might be a constitutional problem. I've heard someone mention that, well, the gas prices are going to go up if we don't let them export crude oil. That one's a real head scratcher to me. And then someone else said, well, he drives his EV to work. That's terrific. And I think that we should all have EVs for our local commutes. That makes perfect sense. And the fact that we get 30% of our electricity through PSE from boilers 1 and 2 at the Colstrip power plant, that's being phased out. So yes, right now coal does power your EV. Mine's powered by my solar panels. You could do that too. Someone else mentioned that, well, we buy backpacks and other products that are made from petroleum as though, gee, we're fighting against it. Well, when was the last time you pulled into REI and bought a whole slug of backpacks and stuffed them in your gas tank to burn and drive your car? That's not what we do. We need those products, and we will for many years. I heard jobs, jobs, jobs. If we double down on this industry, Whatcom County will be tied to fossil fuels for decades. What happened to Flint, Michigan that tied themselves to General Motors? Go tour that for a while and see how good it is to just concentrate on one industry. Housing affordability?
Time.
Let's crisscross the county with leaky pipelines and exploding trains, and sure, property values will fall, I guarantee. So I'm asking you to extend the moratorium for the sake of my new granddaughter going to be born at the end of this year. So for her and for me, thank you. Please extend the moratorium.
Yoshi, John, and then David Kirshner.
Thank you. My name is Yoshi Ravel. Thank you to members of the audience and staff, members of the County Council, and Mr. County Executive. If you're still here, I support the moratorium that we were discussing tonight, and I hope at some point you will make it permanent. One thing we haven't talked about tonight is mindless consumption. And in blocking this export of unrefined fossil fuels, what we're really trying to say is we need to stop mindlessly consuming. And the person who talked earlier about all the petroleum products that we purchase, that is us purchasing it. And if we really want to take care of this planet, we need to stop doing that. We need to stop mindlessly consuming. And I will say that I have put my actions where my words are. 8 days ago, I gave my car away to a charity, to the Humane Society. I no longer drive or own a car. I walk, I ride the bus, I ride a bicycle, because I know climate change is real, and I know that I have to change my behaviors. I can't only ask somebody else to change their behaviors. I have to change my behaviors to say that I really believe climate change is real, and I'm going to consume less. If everybody on the planet lived like America does, it would take 5 to 6 planet Earths to support us. That's not going to happen. It's not going to work. We overshoot the planet's ability to take care of and support the human family. And we're all doing that, whether we deny it or not, by our actions. We are mindlessly consuming to the point of causing harm and eventually death to ourselves. Now, another thing that I haven't heard discussed is there's a thing called the real economy and the false economy. The real economy is nature. Nature provides the sun and light, heat from the sun and light from the sun. Nature provides the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food that we eat. All the resources that we have are provided by nature. All the wood, all the clothes we're wearing, it's all provided by nature. We provide a little bit of labor. Human beings do. But let's be honest, it's a small amount of labor compared to how much labor that nature gives us. We are all focused on the false economy. The false economy is represented by this dollar bill. Money floats around in a circle, and we all are fixated on it. Oh my goodness.
30
must have
seconds,
money,
please.
Must have money. Money does nothing. It's a false economy. Nature is the real economy, and we provide a small amount of labor. Don't be fooled by the swirling toilet bowl called money. It will suck us into the sewer. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a pleasant evening. Thank you.
John Holstein, then David Kirshner, and then Charles Bailey.
John Holstein, I live in Whatcom County. First, let me thank all of you for your tireless efforts at keeping Whatcom County the really nice place to live. Please approve the bill for extension of the moratorium on shipments of unrefined fossil fuels out of Cherry Point. Let's look at the moratorium issue from another perspective. We have to bring the fight against climate change down to our level. We must fight climate change harder now at the local level. We can't leave it up to the federal government any longer. Considering the present hostility of the federal government towards efforts to control corporate neglect of their responsibilities towards the environment, this moratorium is one effective tool in our fight to preserve Whatcom County's safe and clean environment. Today's victory in killing Millennium Bulk Terminal's plan to build North America's largest coal export facility in Longview is an example of what we can do at the local level. By extending the moratorium, we are taking one more step in the transition to clean energy. Combined with the local efforts of many cities and counties and states throughout the country, we are offsetting the efforts of certain corporations and their lackeys in national government to delay the transition to clean energy and continue getting rich by selling dirty energy. In fact, if we do not extend the moratorium, we are supporting those who are resisting the transition to clean energy. Thank you for your attention and again for your commendable efforts for the residents of Whatcom County.
David, then Charles and Amy Glasser.
My name is David Kirshner, and I live on Lemmy Island. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I signed myself up at 6:40, and I didn't really expect to speak this early in the evening. I'm here to urge you to extend the moratorium on exports of unrefined fossil fuels until the study of legal options is completed and new development regulations are in place. It does seem that extending the moratorium for 6 months will actually help keep oil industry jobs in Whatcom County. According to the International Energy Agency, the cost of operating an oil refinery in Thailand is about 1/3 the cost of operating one on the West Coast. We owe it to residents of Whatcom County to extend the moratorium until we can make sure we have done everything we can to minimize the public health and safety risks of crude oil transport into Whatcom County. We also need to ensure that any new projects at Cherry Point aren't going to damage fisheries, tribal fishing rights, and fishery industry jobs. Extending the moratorium
is the right thing to do for our local economy, our local environment, and public health. Thank you.
Charles, then Amy, then R.B. McKeon.
Good evening, Council, and thank you for all the care and attention you have given to this issue now through many hearings. My name is Charles Bailey. I live on Lummi Island, and I'm here to support the proposition that you should further extend the moratorium on permits for any new projects of whatever scope and scale for exporting unrefined fossil fuels. I think coming to a number of these hearings, the arguments have become more clear over time, and this evening I think there were a good summary of the pros and cons. I listened very carefully to the people speaking on behalf of no more moratorium. I listened very carefully with an open mind, and I did not quite understand how it added up to the threats that were being proposed if you fail to extend the moratorium. I find that it is a question of your duty to promote the public health and safety, your duty to and our right to assert the needs of future generations. And I again commend you for the care that you have brought and the legal study that is underway, and that I hope that you will not have to again extend the moratorium. But after the completion of the legal study, I really strongly recommend you use the fullest scope of your powers to protect all of us by halting future projects for the transport of unrefined fossil fuels from Cherry Point. Thank you.
Amy, R.B., and then Chris Colon.
Amy Glasser, Bellingham. Thank you very much for the moratorium so far, and certainly I support it being continued. The trains drove me and my husband and my family out of Custer because we live right next to them, and the idling trains that Wendy talked about were idling in front of our place long before they started idling in front of hers. Now I live near the hospital, and you can't leave your windows open at night because still, the way the wind blows, we can hear those trains all through the night. It could only get worse if this moratorium doesn't continue. The one thing that hasn't been said is the Lummi Nation's rights. And the Army Corps of Engineers already gave them, well, they basically won the case for us on GPT because the Army Corps of Engineers agreed that it was their land. I'm wondering if there's a way for the county council and the county to come up with an agreement with the Lummi Nation that, given the fact that the Army Corps of Engineers already said it was their territory, that we actually have them have more control over it, so that projects have to go through them first, and then if they think it's okay, then it goes through our system. But they've done a pretty good job of fighting against anything that's going to hurt their fishing rights and the water rights that they have, and I think we owe it to them, since it's their land, to put them within the process to say no. So thank you for the moratorium, continue it, thank you very much.
R.B., Chris, and then Natalie McClendon.
My name is R.B. McKeon. I work at the BP Cherry Point Refinery. We've had thoughtful, respectful, and engaging dialogue with some of you over the past several months. And during each of these conversations, there's a mutual call for continued dialogue and a commitment from council members to work together with industry to understand the impacts the decisions this council is making has on our business, our employees, and the community that we live and work in. We appreciate this dialogue, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight. In the September 12th letter the BP Cherry Point Refinery submitted to Council, we outlined why we oppose the extension of this moratorium, highlighting many of the same concerns that Phillips 66 spoke to earlier this evening. You've heard from countless members of our refinery, our contractors, community partners, and neighbors, reminding you of the impact the businesses of the Cherry Point UGA has on this community, and tonight you have and will continue to hear more. Our employees are proud of the work they do, safely providing heat, light, and mobility to your constituents who depend on it. They're also innovative, creative problem solvers who seek to be a part of the energy solutions of the future. They serve on boards and committees of nonprofits, churches, civic clubs, giving their time to these organizations that make our community the great place to live that it is. They do this not because they are told to or asked to, but because Whatcom County is their home too. Legislating by moratorium does not serve anyone well. Construction at the refinery is already subject to rigorous regulatory requirements that include a public process. The moratorium improperly serves as a de facto revision to lawful land use provisions and processes without going through the proper legal assessment. The Cherry Point Refinery has been here for more than 45 years. BP and its businesses are committed to being a part of the energy solution. For example, BP operates the largest renewables business among our oil and gas peers, and over the past decade has invested in over 40 venture startups, with around half of those focusing on low-carbon solutions. But in order to do any of this, we have to not only be able to respond to change as it happens, but to anticipate what is coming next. And simply put, the continued extension of this moratorium inhibits our ability to respond to changing conditions and remain competitive. We welcome the opportunity for open and transparent dialogue between council, industry, and all of the vested stakeholders, including all of those who are here tonight, with the hope that we reach a fair and equitable solution that allows the Cherry Point Refinery to continue to operate and invest in this community for another 45 years. Thank you.
Chris, then Natalie, then Gabriel Westergreen.
Good evening, members of the council. Thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Chris Cullen, again, from Blaine, father of 6, so I appreciate the night out. It's always good to see you here, and gets me away from the house for a while. Tonight, I'd like to talk about care and commitment. So we've heard a lot of passionate statements tonight. A lot of people feel very strongly about their views and their positions. And, you know, to me, that warms my heart because it shows people care. There's a high level of care about each one of these issues. And even though we might not all agree or see eye to eye on these issues, it shows a distinct level of care. And I think that care comes through in not only for our community, for the people that live here, and for each other. I have the privilege to work at BP. I'm a continuous improvement coach. One of the things that's been one of the biggest blessings for me in that role is in BP, I've experienced the greatest amount of diversity I've ever had in a workplace. And in that diversity, I've found that our best outcomes are with the diversity of thought and the cross-functional teams that we're able to pull together to make those things happen. So when I think about this community and the care that we all have, even though we're on different pages, we might have difference of opinion, doesn't mean our opinion's wrong, they're just different. And how do we leverage that? How do we pull that together and come to a right understanding? My concern is we get so divisive, it's a win or lose proposition, and if we don't do this right, everybody loses in the end. I would just ask that we'd make a commitment. So when we look at this and say, you know, the concern is here for this county, when we have 42% of our families that are barely making the minimum cost of living, and we've almost had a 10% reduction in weekly average wages since 2015. We run the risk of becoming the most beautiful place that nobody can afford to live in. The commitment I'd ask of us, of this council, of the people here in the room tonight in this community, is that we'd work together, that we can come up and help guide the best possible outcomes for this community. Again, let's not try to legislate through moratoriums, through temporary moratoriums. I think Alex said it. Let's get through this quagmire, work together, find the stakeholder engagement. Rona said we want to talk about a dialogue. That's what we want to have, is a dialogue. Let's have a seat at a table, allow for the diversity of thought, and come for the right possible outcomes for this county for years to come, and work together to make that happen. I'm going to do my part to make that commitment, and I'd ask that from the rest of you as well. Thank you.
Natalie, Gabriel, and then Bob Burr. I pass. You pass? Okay. Gabriel, Bob Burr, and then TJ Lee. Is Gabriel must be gone. Okay, Bob Burr, then TJ Lee, then Josh Summers.
Hello. I am the old and increasingly feeble man previously known as Bob Burr. I am now known as Bobby Burr. And I carry the 60-year-old equivalent of a cell phone with me, my scribbled notes about what I'm going to talk about. The reason that I'm now Bobby Burr is that my grandchildren and nieces have always called me Bobby because I'm childlike. Ken Mann at trivia the other night witnessed that when his daughter was taunting me. But the people that I care about most in this world and who I fear for most in this world are my grandchildren. And my reading of the climate change tea leaves is that we are rapidly headed to mass extinction as a species, and it's not just our species, it's multiple species. And because the administration in Washington, D.C. now is doing everything in their power to bring about that mass extinction, it is incumbent upon state and local governments to step up to the plate and do what they can do to fight it. So I think all of you know about climate change. I think you all know that fossil fuel consumption contributes greatly to it. What I haven't heard mentioned tonight is that meat consumption contributes greatly to it as well. So I would urge the people who really care about the future of this planet to stop eating meat. I'll close now by saying
30 seconds,
that
please.
I have great trust in you to make the right decision. Thank you.
TJ, then Josh, and then Brooks Anderson.
TJ Lee, Bellingham. So I'm not going to say everything that I wrote down, give some time back to people who've gone long. But first I want to say my respect for everyone who got up and stood in front of people to talk about something that they care about. It's not an easy thing to do, at least for me. So I feel privileged for being able to live in Bellingham and do work that I love and raise a family, afford to raise a family. I've lived here for the past 7 years and worked at the Ferndale refinery, Phillips 66. I'm currently the process development lead. So a lot of what Joe talked about, coming up with justifying projects that we can invest in the long-term future of the refinery is my job to work at. Before working at the Phillips 66 refinery, I worked for a refinery outside of Philadelphia for 7 years. And I was lucky to work in a refinery that, while I was there, invested about $1 billion in creating more efficiency, more safety, clean fuels. And that was one of the, I believe there were 10 refineries that were there when I first started, and all but 3 at one point closed. And it was because of the support of the community that the company, and the decisions are made at the corporate headquarters whether it's a viable investment. So if there's support of the community to invest, then investments go through and refineries stay in business. Everyone wants, as long as there is fuel, as long as the economy demands fuel, it should be produced locally at safe, efficient, environmentally refineries here in Whatcom County. So in order to do that, it's important to have commitment and a cooperation and partnership with the community. So that is some of the potential risks of having a more adversarial relationship. They're complicated problems that we need to solve, and I think if we work on them together, that's how we'll get the best results. The planet will be protected, jobs will be protected. I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. So that's all.
Josh, then Brooks, and then Maggie Rose.
Good evening, Council. My name is Josh Summers from Linden, Washington, and I work for the Phillips 66 Ferndale Refinery. Throughout this hearing, we've heard representatives from Phillips 66 discuss our opposition to the ordinance. We've heard how this moratorium raises constitutional concerns and questions as to whether the Council has the statutory authority to leverage zoning powers to regulate commerce by favoring one commodity over another. We've heard concerns over the definition of unrefined fossil fuel, given that it is overly inclusive and inaccurately includes refined petroleum products such as butane. Most importantly, we've heard from the employees themselves, each of whom have expressed their concern about how the imposition of restrictions to business hinders the competitive position, and despite what has been expressed as intentions to preserve jobs within Whatcom County, the moratorium actually places those at risk. The Ferndale Refinery is a respected and contributing member to this community. We believe that our record of contribution reflects our desires to create an environment where businesses, residents, elected officials, public servants, educators, and nonprofits, and others can work together to preserve and enhance everything that we love about Whatcom County. In my capacity at the refinery, I get an opportunity to work with local leaders in executing our community investment program, which focuses on three fundamental areas: education and literacy, the environment, safety, and community preparedness. I believe that all of us here in this room have a vested interest in one or more, if not all of those things. So I'm here to ask, where can we work together? Where can we collaborate on to make a difference in this community? The divisiveness of our day calls to mind the old adage that we can either win together or we can fail alone. Generations of Ferndale Refinery employees have lived and worked in this community, and they'll all tell you the same thing, that the best part about working in Whatcom County is living in Whatcom County. By keeping businesses competitive, by enabling prosperity and growth, by coming to the middle and saying, let's work together, the future of Whatcom County is strengthened, and it's for this generation and for the next. So with that, we respectfully ask that you disapprove extending the moratorium. Thank you and have a good evening.
Brooks, I think she might have left. I don't see her. Okay. Maggie Rose, then Patrick Allisey, and then Dana Briggs.
Hello, I'm Maggie Rose. I live in Birch Bay. And this very day, I was 20 minutes late for an appointment because of a train. I hear the people from the refineries talk about adversarial attitudes, but really, it seems like it's not an adversarial thing to just let things be like they are and not get bigger. So I kind of don't like that wording. But I hope you continue this moratorium, and I really wish that you would make it permanent. I feel like the rest of the world is kind of leaving the United States behind lately, in that they really are being serious about finding other ways for energy and making commitments to get rid of polluting energy. And, you know, it seems to me that this is the end of the road. I can't imagine 20 years from now that petroleum is going to be the industry it is today. I really think that there are enough people on this earth who seriously are looking at that as a big problem, as an existential problem. And so that's just my opinion, but I wanted to ask you, are you totally in charge of this? I mean, does like the governor have anything to say about it, or is this just Whatcom County decides this? Can you answer?
It's a lot more than just us.
Okay, that's good. I'm kind of glad. Because so many people rely on that for their jobs. And I sympathize totally, but still you can look at it and say this is, I mean, we watched that happen with the loggers. And oh my gosh, we're a vanishing breed. And yet, you know, they found other jobs. But I think the longer we put off looking in other directions, the more we're going to be stuck and not have directions to go in. I think it will be, the longer we wait, the harder it will be to make that switch. Thank you.
Patrick, then Dana, and then Megan Porter.
Patrick Allisey, 4825 Alderson Road, Birch Bay. I do appreciate your diligence, and I do appreciate people coming up here and speaking and getting me to think a little bit. Some people have mentioned climate change. There's climate all over the world. We have different climates and people live in them. Climate change is the polite language. It's global warming. It's the acidification of our seas. It's the release of carbon dioxide. Industries need to pay their way. I've heard about all the taxes they pay and the wages that they supply and people offering things to people who need it, poor people. Well, listen, this is just a $20 bill, but some of this money that they get comes out of the environment. So all of us pay. It's a tax they put on the environment, and it's a deficit to the environment. I believe that there is natural capital, that's the environment. There's also human capital. You people represent human capital. These people represent human capital. And sometimes with the coal and the oil, there's human capital that pays the cost, and it comes out of human capital, and they put it in their pocket, and they smile. I'm not smiling.
Dana, and then Megan Porter, and then that's the end of our list, but if anyone else would like to speak, we'd ask that you get ready to come down, please.
Good evening. My name's Dana Briggs. I live in North Bellingham, and I recently moved back to this community roughly a year ago after having been gone for 14 years. On August the 25th, after a long planned trip, my partner and I traveled to Houston, Texas, and I actually flew in the night that Hurricane Harvey hit Corpus Christi and Rockport. For approximately 6 days after that, while we were sitting in a hotel waiting to get out of the flood-prone area of Houston, we were watching, along with the rest of the nation, everything that was going on with the flooding that was going on in the bayous and around Harris County and down in the southeastern part of the state and so on and so forth. When the flooding finally subsided and we managed to get to Brazoria County, where my partner had been raised as a child, we saw firsthand what flooding had occurred by both the Brazos and the St. Bernard rivers, and in fact that entire county of Brazoria, the western 2/3 of it was completely blocked off with mandatory evacuations. One of the grossly underreported aspects of everything having to do with Harvey was the fact that the oil refineries along the entire coast of Texas, most of them had been flooded out, and petroleum products by their very nature, whether refined or unrefined, are toxic. They were flowing into the waterways all up and down the southeast coast. They were anything from gas stations to chemical plants in Harris County and to the east of Houston had toxins flowing into the waterways, whether it was the bayous or into Galveston Bay. And if I had my way, we would permanently ban all petroleum products, period. While I understand that despite the best efforts, and I know that they're doing the best that they possibly can, the people who work in the fossil fuel industries don't want disasters in any way, shape, or form. And while this area may not be prone to hurricanes, it certainly is prone to other natural disasters, whether they're volcanoes, tsunamis, earthquakes, or otherwise. And it just doesn't apply to the refineries. It applies to the trains. It applies to diesel trucks and so on and so forth. Disasters happen. It's not a matter of if, it's
30
a matter
seconds,
of when.
please.
So the moratorium, from my standpoint, needs to be permanent. Where we go after fossil fuels can be a long-standing debate, but right now, the immediate concern, as was shown in Houston, and probably in Florida, and probably in Puerto Rico, and definitely in Nigeria, and definitely everywhere else that there's large concentrations of petroleum facilities, is that it's an immediate safety hazard. Thank you for your time.
Megan Porter? She must have left. Okay, that's the end of our signups. Come on down if you'd like to speak.
Hello, my name is Bill Lafreniere. I'm a Whatcom County resident. Please do not continue the moratorium. Remember the GP plant? Remember Recomp and the olivine plants? These are examples of industries
that were lost to environmental activism. When they win, we lose. All of the support jobs for these industries are gone too. They have been replaced with microbreweries, pot growing and selling industries, and a feeling of being lost to our youth. We need coal and petroleum industry. China has improved its pollution control processes while we have stagnated, afraid of improving our industry. What we do not improve, we will lose. Thank you.
Larry Williams, Whatcom County. I usually look at trends because that tells me more where I think I should go. And I think the same thing applies to this situation. And the trends, given the amount of carbon that's in the atmosphere as a result of underground fossil fuels coming to the surface and being utilized, is what's causing the warmer temperatures around the globe. It's really important that we recognize that that's a long-term impact on the environment. And if we think that we can reverse it quickly, I haven't heard anyone say we could. This is a permanent, or correction, a long-term impact that's taking place with the release of the underground petroleum products. Now, I make charcoal, and I use a bonfire technique. And yes, some smoke goes up, but I use that charcoal for agricultural purposes. It's a technique to, plants sequester the carbon out of the atmosphere. I process the plant material through pyrolysis into the soil. And the charcoal in the soil, there's wide range of opinions of how long the charcoal can be in the soil, between 2,000 years and 60,000 years of atmospheric carbon being processed and stored in the soil for agricultural purposes. It's an option, one option. Alone is not enough. But change is on us, and it's very important that we look at that change and decide what we want to do. In the moment, I do not see taking resources, timber and coal, or petroleum, I should say, and shipping it overseas as anything other than an economic downturn for our community. We should be processing that material here
30 seconds, please.
if we want to use it. But we're on the downside of petroleum products. It sounds good, but we're on the downside. And let's change sooner rather than later. It will be easier. Thank you.
Jeff Tenpass, sorry, I was on page 7, so it might be back there yet.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right. I'm Vice President and Partner in BAI Environmental Services of Linden, Washington. As I've stated in past written and verbal comments to the County Council, I strongly encourage you to protect and enhance the existing industrial base at Cherry Point and vote no on extending the current moratorium. I want to address two topics in my allotted time, the economy and the environment. I feel this is a both and not an either or decision. Business prosperity and environmental stewardship can exist together. First, the economy. Whatcom County holds a treasure in the industrial partners on Cherry Point through their giving to charitable organizations like the United Way or Boys and Girls Club of Whatcom County, through their active employment involvement in the community. Just the other day, I'm walking out Ferndale ball fields to coach some soccer, and there's 2 other employees out there actively involved in the community. Large tax base has been mentioned numerous times already tonight. We have a branch office in Southwest Washington where unemployment rates are, from the latest stats, at least 1 point higher than Whatcom County. A good paying job is harder to find Southwest Washington, like most of the rest of the state, so we can be thankful for what we have here. Whatcom County is a great place to live and work. Let's do all that we can to avoid a self-inflicted downturn to the local economy. The health of our local economy is directly related to the health of Cherry Point. Promoting public policy that negatively impacts Cherry Point will impact the overall health of Whatcom County. Cherry Point industry also sustains and promotes Whatcom County's environmental heritage. There are strict guidelines already in place from various government entities. Industry at Cherry Point undergoes ongoing extensive environmental review. Standing with the industrial sector at Cherry Point is not turning your back on environmental stewardship. Let's not be confused with the phrase of any future development would be a blow to the environmentalist. There's lots of environmentalists or creational stewards that work at these sites. They care just as much about the air, water, and wildlife in Whatcom County as those on the other side of this debate. Some would argue that it is in either business or the environment. I feel it's a both business and the environment. Whatcom County can promote a healthy business climate by supporting heavy industry and the infrastructure needed along with environmental protection. For the past 20 plus years, I've worked at these sites at Cherry Point
30 seconds,
and areas
please.
to the south. I just am thoroughly impressed with their kind of attention to the environment, their focus on safety. These are just great business partners to have in Whatcom County. And, just speaking to the energy infrastructure, some recent studies show that 35% growth in energy needs in the next 20 years will be needed. I'm all for alternative fuels. That will be the way of the future, but not maybe in the next 20
Time.
years. 70 to 80% will still come from hydrocarbons. Thank you for your time.
Everett Barton, Puget neighborhood. I've experienced a market-driven termination on my unit where I'm living, and getting out, of course, to find a new place. Because I'm retired and below the credit score and income guidelines, I'm having difficulty. And so when I approached Opportunity Council and Whatcom Homeless Service Center, they just indicated that I'd have to be totally homeless before I could get on the list, and then I have to work my way up the list. And so I started hunting around for a house because I have a prospective roommate from my church who's a good hard earner, and we were going to do a house. And I came across this idea of since the one cadre coming into town, which is the college students, they have their parents to co-sign for them. But folks like me and this other young man who's 36, he's not in the college bracket, this cadre of individuals needs co-signing as well. So I'm trying to generate some political will through you guys and through the shareholders of the corporation to see if we can have communities of faith who are realtors and communities of faith who are owners to create a nonprofit consortium that would underwrite things like sewer, water, garbage, and recycling for a group of houses that would house people who are qualified, who get the USDA stamp of approval from their church to be a strong earner in a residence. And residences, communities of like-minded individuals seem to prosper a lot better than just an apartment complex where you have any and all kind of lifestyles going. So the idea of we're all part of communities of faith. We all go to church somewhere. But those people who are realtors or property owners need to consider forming a coalition to assist Opportunity Council and the
30
Whatcom
seconds,
and
please.
the state-driven agencies that are trying to alleviate this problem. and, and provide some underwriting for houses that can be communities of like-minded individuals, and that they can prosper in the community as well. So, thank you for your time.
Good evening. I didn't really think about speaking on this particular topic, but I'll save the topic I had for some other time because it doesn't seem quite as important at the moment. I did want to say, though, I lived in Japan for 26 years. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Kathy McDevitt.
Thank you.
It's not that important, but anyway, thank you for asking. I lived and worked in Japan for 26 years, and when I was raised on Lake Sammamish, the one with all the M's, down by Bellevue, and came back to Western Washington after basically retiring from teaching in Japan. And I want to say that I find it very unfortunate that this country, as much as I would like to admire and respect this country for the many, many good values and qualities we have here, the wonderful people, the opportunities, the freedom that we are trying to preserve, I am very disappointed at the lack of attention to our transportation deficiencies. And so I think this relates in some ways to the issue about moratorium. I agree that jobs are nice. We should probably share as many as we can. I feel that people who make $100,000 a year, I would envy them greatly. I've never been close to that. But I've survived. I lived in Japan without a car for most of that time. It was a wonderful existence. No car insurance, no wrecks, no worries, no car maintenance, no oil changes. I could use their public transportation. And I think that we are very short-sighted in not thinking deeply about improving the options for people. There are some people who would rather not have cars, but we are forced to if we want to survive. I tried going without a car in Birch Bay. But when I had a heart problem, and now I have macular degeneration, I realized that as much as I would like to survive there, I could not possibly.
30 seconds, please.
So I really appreciate Whatcom County Transit being there at all, but I think we need to look further and deeper and very quickly to improve the options for transportation in this country and not be slaves to cars and the fuels that they use. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Natalie Chavez. You've heard me speak a few times in the past, so I'm not going to repeat everything that I've already said before. I am in support of extending the moratorium on permitting projects that require permits for exporting unrefined fossil fuel. I believe that extending the moratorium is a socially responsible thing to do, the environmentally responsible thing to do, the culturally responsible thing to do for the natives, and is in the best interest of our community at large. I want to thank you, council members, for conducting public hearings regarding this controversial issue. I have certainly learned a lot more than I ever knew about this particular issue, and it has been fascinating for me to hear the different perspectives, fears, and hopes of so many people from this community. That being said, I am grateful that the energy of desperation, panic, fear of immediate job loss, and anxiety that was felt in the earlier hearings has subsided significantly. It has helped to have more clarity, communication, and education throughout this whole process, so thank you for that. There were a number of people at the last hearing who were trying to convince you all that BP is a good neighbor. That was surprising for me to hear because I believe that no convincing was or is needed. Nobody that I recall ever said that BP was a bad neighbor. BP is a good neighbor and is doing some good things in and for this community. And as far as I know, this process and this moratorium has not been about anyone being a bad neighbor. All of us here happen to live in one of the most, if not the most, progressive counties in not only the state of Washington, but in the entire country. And with that comes a huge responsibility, one that is difficult for most of us to comprehend at some level. Huge ramifications, impacts, and ripple effects can occur with each decision that our community makes for other tribes, other waters, other lands, and other communities. I believe that it is important for all of us to always, always keep that in our minds and in our hearts before making any significant decisions and even before making any insignificant decisions. It is my hope that we can all move just beyond being just good neighbors to each other and move to being extraordinary neighbors to one another in an extraordinary community that we all choose to co-create. What might that look like? A community with no name calling, with no hurtful signs stating that specific people are job killers. A community where Resources for Sustainable Communities and BP invite each other over for lunch and perhaps some beer to share what it is that they are doing and why they are doing it, to share their challenges and their visions for the future. And can you imagine if some of our frenemy neighbors actually chose to collaborate and work on a project together that helped to strengthen our community and that helped to create more jobs in a non-toxic manner that did not require an unrefined fossil fuel permit? Now that would be extraordinary. A community where the Lummi Nation invites BP and Phillips 66 executives over to share a salmon meal or vice versa. A community where
30 seconds,
A
please.
community where everyone is open to constructive, respectful dialogue, open to thinking outside of the box, open to getting out of the comfort zone, and open to doing things differently than the way that they have always been done, and open to evolving together in a new way. This is my hope for our future. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak to us on the moratorium?
Good evening. Hamilton Dutcher here, and I'm glad you guys are here. And yes, I appreciate the moratorium. It's helping us get into better energy sources and creating new ones. And it's good and clean. I appreciate the lady from Japan. Japan, a long time ago, over 50 years ago, had roughly the same problem with rail. The government decided no problems. No accidents. Our corporations here, of course the word corporation is a hide for personal responsibility. A couple of years ago, they had a spill and would not admit it for over 2.5 years. What are we going to do if that happens here? Maybe we've got a major problem. When something happens to our environment, whether it's the air, the water, the ground, it dissipates all over the place. When we have fires over wherever, it goes up over the mountains. It goes, well, when the volcano literally covered the whole western half of the states with dust, we can't stop that. We have to watch out for stuff. And this is why I'm glad you are on the moratorium. I think it's great, and I thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak on this subject? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to council. What's the wishes of the council?
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Ms. Brenner.
I'm really glad you were one of the last speakers because it was very positive and uplifting. I really do think that this is an issue that's unfortunately pit people against each other, and I do have a strong opinion about it. I did my homework. By the way, I've never taken money from anybody, including the refineries or anybody else, or the environmentalists, anybody. I just feel very strongly that you had a few people talking about global warming and climate change and things like that. One of the worst problems we have with the acidification of the water and all that stuff to the detriment of our salmon, which I'm a fanatic about, is what's coming over here from Asia. Not what's coming locally, but what's coming from Asia. And what really bothers me is nobody can see it, so they just assume we've got beautiful air and everything's fine, and if there's any problems, I won't say everybody does this, but it's just easy to blame the refineries. I would like to see us refine more, not less. And I feel like we have refineries here. I can't speak for those in Texas. I can't speak from anywhere else. But in Whatcom County, there are very strong environmental protections. Nothing's perfect. I understand that. But if we shut down the refineries here right now, it's not going to, except it'll make people feel better here, it's really not going to do anything for the global warming issue. It's going to just make it worse if more people shut down here where we have stronger rules and they start doing more in Asia and China. I mean, geez, whoever talked about China, that blew me away. Every time I see news about China, they've all got masks on. I do believe that this is a transitory time, that we are transiting away from fossil fuels, but it's going to take a while. And I would rather have it done under the best circumstances, not under the worst circumstances. And I do feel like the wording of the moratorium is, I guess you could interpret it either way, but there's definitely this thing about, you know, we'll let the refineries exist, but we don't like this, we don't want it, we don't want, you know, and it's the negative attitude where I would rather we have all of refining done in the most environmental ways instead of saying, well, we're just going to stop it here and wait, you know, they're not going to stop it in other parts of the world. And we aren't following the rest of the world. I mean, to me, one of the worst places is in Asia, all parts of Asia, lots of them, because they don't have the rules we have. I did look into that. Their rules aren't anything like what we have here. So I think we need to work with the refineries and work with the environmentalists here and I don't remember who said it, but come up with something that can work and make us part of the solution by doing the best job here so it doesn't have to be exported. All the talk about the railroads, I can't stand the railroads. We have absolutely no control over the railroads. And I feel really bad for the people who have suffered through impacts from the railroads, but we have absolutely no control over anything they do. It's almost like they're more important than Congress. They're more important than anybody. They seem to be able to do anything they want. So even if we shut down all the refineries in Whatcom County, that stuff's going to come through here one way or another to go somewhere else. And I just feel, you know, I think everybody's got different opinions, but I feel like doing it the best way is what we can and should be doing at this point as we transition. And I feel like we're very fortunate to have the refineries we have here in Whatcom County who do that. So I'm not supporting, I didn't support it in the first place, and I certainly am not going to support the continuation.
Mr. Donovan.
Thanks. I agree with a lot of what Councilmember Bernard just said, except I think we need to be clear, this is not about shutting down the refineries. As much as some people may be pitching it that way, on both sides. But it is an interim ordinance. There's no such thing as a good interim ordinance, so it's got problems, I think. But it's addressing a problem that we have that I think we're not prepared to deal with a permit that gets dropped for a new major facility, something like similar to what we went through with the GPT, the SSA facility. That we've got these projects pointing at us, pipelines, increase crude by rail. Yeah, we don't have any control over the railroads, but we need to find out what we can do as a local government to address the impacts of stuff like, you know, more trains coming through here, more ships coming through here. And I don't think we're prepared to do that, which is why we have this interim ordinance and why we're having a study to try to figure out what we can do. And, you know, I want to have something permanent. I don't see, you know, I don't see this moratorium as being something permanent. I think we're going to have to come up with something that's permanent, that changes our code and changes how we deal with major project permits. So, you know, and there was a request, actually, I think the representative, WBA asked for a response on this about, communicating with the industries and dialogue and working forward on this. I hope we do that. But I do want to point out that I know I have, and I think most, if not everybody on this council, has met with representatives from BP in Cherry Point. And I believe at the beginning of this whole process, we asked you to work with the WBA and industries at Cherry Point and come participate in the process, and the answer was no. So, I want to have that dialogue, but, we got a no, and then we got political ads, disinformation political ads being run saying, we're going to do a study to kill 2,300 jobs. Where do you get that number from? Yeah, I really hope we can have that dialogue. But I hope so we kind of put this discussion in the scope of what we're really trying to do here. It's not shutting down refineries. It's not, going to change the world and create a new alternative fuel energies. How can we as a council protect the public health and safety in response to these things that are targeting Whatcom County? And I think that's why we need another interim moratorium so we can get some work done to do something permanent so we know how to deal with these issues. So I support it.
Mr. Mann?
I want to just start by addressing something Ms. Brenner said. And Barbara, you know I love you.
Uh-oh.
But in your very, very fine comments, you probably said the phrase shut down the refineries 3 or 4 times. And I have to believe that unless all you read is the Whatcom Business Alliance newsletters, this is not an effort to shut down the refineries. This has nothing to do with shutting down the refineries. And I'll freely admit and gratefully admit and acknowledge all of the many benefits of having the Cherry Point Industries and the refineries here, and that goes for Alcoa and Talco as well. We've heard about the jobs and the taxes and the community service, the community involvement, the donations to charity. All that is true, and all that is very much appreciated by me, and I'm pretty sure by just about everyone up on the council. As I read the language of this moratorium, it's very narrowly construed. It protects the existing refineries. Very specifically, it talks about new or expanded facilities for shipment or export of unrefined fossil fuels not to be consumed at Cherry Point. I mean, it's a pretty darn narrow moratorium, which we're implementing to give ourselves time to plan for infrastructure, transportation, environmental protection, jobs, and yes, taxes, and everything else that we're responsible for the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And the GPT thing came at us kind of out of the blue, I think, for a lot of us. We weren't allowed to do anything about it while it was being proposed. And now we're saying, well, let's not let that happen again. Let us take a pause. Let's not get swamped with any more major project permits. Let's put a moratorium on this very narrow subset of industrial activities and make sure we get it right going forward. So that's what we're doing, and that's all I have to say.
Mr. Sadhu?
Actually, I would like to start why we even have this discussion. This moratorium and all this, where did it start? You know, in December previous year, there was a moratorium on export of crude oil since 1974. So, with the utmost pressure from the petroleum industry, that moratorium was lifted. That's what started this discussion. So, the first fear was, why would, the things we hear, the people who actually make the decisions, they are looking 20 years from today. They're not looking for, oh, what's we going to do in 2018 or 2019. They're looking at what are we going to do in 2035. So why would they actually lift that moratorium? Now, that's where this discussion started. So it means there is a intention or some freedom the industry wants to look at where they would want to be 20 years from tomorrow. So if we look at North American market, the electric vehicles and all the changes, the options we have are much, much bigger than the rest of the world. 45% of the world population lives in Asia. In the last 25 years, the income of Asian people has increased that they can dream of owning a car. You have seen the movies of China, bicycles. They're like 100 wide and running on the highway. They built highways for bicycles. And now they're running cars. That's where the demand is. So when we started this discussion as a council, I can speak for myself, it was a truly effort to preserve Cherry Point jobs. And that has been hijacked. It was hijacked in a way, oh, there is a move to shut down the refineries, because that was the line of defense in the question which was asked. The question was asked, are you going to convert to a terminal or not? Instead of answering that question, that no, for next 20 years, we're going to continue the business we are doing, these jobs are preserved, and we will continue to do our business. It has not been said even till today. The answer was given, oh, this county is not business friendly, and they're about to run us out. Like asking a genuine question should not be converted into a threat. So I think this was the real effort to preserve Cherry Point jobs, and this was said in the council meeting several times, that we rather have this oil processed in Whatcom County or in the United States, because there are much better regulations, much better ways of preserving the environment than doing it in Asia and then bringing the finished product back here. You think that will be cheaper than what we are paying for today? No. The second thing, the argument is given about the investment. You know, if you look at round numbers, you know, I'll give you a small mathematics. BP refinery is 250,000 barrels per day. At least that's the sticker capacity. If you do the math, 25 cents a gallon, just 25 cents a gallon is worth $1 billion. So when you look at the people who are looking 25 years from today making the decision, it is being said that if we do this, the corporate look at which is friendly county, which is friendly country, that's where we're going to do the investment. These things don't matter. When they're looking at 25 years from today, where they're going to have the next market for next 25 years, they're not looking at $2 billion investment. That's peanuts. So it's not, I'm not saying that, yes, this is being decided, but this is another way to look at these things. And we are only wise to ask the right questions. And they talk about dialogue. The dialogue happens when both sides want to talk about it, not just one side. The dialogue is, what is the future of petroleum industry over the next 20 years? This is like, we have seen, there were horse buggies and the automobile came in. You think there was no discussion like this, what we are having today? Yes, it was. Then we were burning wood. Then coal came, and then came petroleum. All these transitions have happened right in front of our eyes. There are ghost towns which were thriving towns with lumber mills, including Bellingham. So these things do happen. All we are going through transition, and we now, that transition which is going to take over next 10, 20 years, now we are looking at only tomorrow or yesterday and getting all wound up in that. Whatever council, at least my perspective is, what we are trying to do is actually preserve Cherry Point jobs, to see that what are the ways we can do that this jobs, this processes do happen at the current facilities and not that they are taken away from us. Now that's something I think, that I was writing another couple of things. Petroleum, somebody talked about backpacks. Yes, I like that, because petroleum is a too much valuable product to take it out and burn it. That's all we do. We take it out of the ground, clean it a little bit, and burn it. Take it out, burn it. Is that the best use? That's why we stopped burning wood, because we would have cut down all the forest by now. And light came on. Are we stupid burning wood for energy? Let's not do that. That's what we are saying. Just burning petroleum to just burn in a car to go from point A to B, the important point is how you get from point A to B, not what you're burning. If you can do it in a better way, if you want to invest money rather than improving environmental controls on coal, why can't we invest the same money into something else which is better? So I think that there is a bus, there was a news just a couple of days ago, a bus traveled 1,000 miles without recharging. There was another article, within 7 years, electric vehicles will start making an impact on the demand for petroleum fuel in 7 years. So should we wait till 7 years and then start deciding? These things happen over time and may take over 10 years. Petroleum industry already knows what their future is. Why are we fighting about it? I think that's where we need the dialogue from the petroleum industry and from your local government, how we can go through the transition together rather than fighting each other. Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
So I remain concerned that calling propane, butane, natural gas as unrefined is inaccurate, and restricting the use of these fuels, which typically replace coal and wood, is just simply bad environmental policy, because they're replacement fuels. They have a lower carbon footprint and they have less impact, particularly to the marine environment if they're spilled. I also remain concerned that the risk of job loss from conversion of these refineries, of any refinery to a terminal, is real. In fact, if I recall correctly, one of the earlier speakers from the refineries told us that there were two facilities, refineries that had already been converted into terminals. So I find it hard to understand the argument that that is not a risk in this particular situation. I also remain concerned that we cannot afford to have anything like the event in this community that happened at Loch Laganic, where 50 people died and there's a $300 million bill for a town of a couple of thousand people because of both the physical damage from the explosion and the residual pollution and contamination afterwards. One of the things that we've heard on several occasions is there really is a lack of accountability, particularly financial accountability, in the event that there's a significant disaster here. I've never heard of the refinery saying, well, I'm going to be responsible if the oil train blows up, and I've never heard of the railroad saying, well, I'm going to be responsible. I've never heard of the producer of the oil, and I've never heard of the tanker organisations. None of these have stepped forward and said, we will be responsible. The best I've heard from a response, a physical response,
in the event of a disaster is that the people would assist in dealing with the problem, right? Well, what does that mean? You send a half a dozen firefighters to add to several dozen firefighters we have here, when really what you need is about 1,000. So I remain all concerned with these. Therefore, I'm going to continue to support the ordinance in its current form while we continue to identify our legal options to protect the health and safety of all our citizens, our employers, including Cherry Point and elsewhere.
Mr. Weimer.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a year and a half. I agree with whoever said we haven't really heard much new this evening, either from the audience or from the council. So I'm kind of ready to vote. I feel like I'm having a schizophrenic moment because tomorrow morning I have to be in Calgary, sometimes referred to as Houston North, where I'm going to be in a room with 30 or 40 oil and gas engineers who's invited me up there to help them draft a pipeline safety standard for the whole Canadian government. And on Monday, I'm going to be in Houston, where I've been invited by the Interstate Natural Gas Association to work cooperatively with them to draft some safety regulations for the natural gas industry. So it's like getting yelled at here for trying to harm oil and gas, and then I spend the rest of my life working collaboratively trying to make things safer. It isn't a black and white situation. And this council certainly hasn't made it a black and white one, even though people on both sides in the audience are trying to make it that way. So we really need to figure out how we can mitigate the impacts if proposals come at us. We don't have that in our code now, and that's why we're in a holding pattern until we can learn how to make sure we protect people if some silly proposal comes at us that we probably have no ability to actually say no to, but we can certainly perhaps mitigate the impacts of it as it perhaps comes through our community. So I'm supporting the moratorium until we're ready to put real stuff in the code that will help mitigate those risks.
Yes, Ms. Brenner.
I was accused of something. I just want to correct it. If I said that you guys are trying to shut them down, what I thought I said was the effect of the moratorium seems negative to people who want to work in this area in the refinery industry. I don't think I said, what if I did? That's not what I meant. I just feel like there's a more positive way to do this than the moratorium. I agree with you guys. There's all kinds of things we could and should come up with to make safety standards better. And I didn't have that opinion that they wouldn't work with the county. I felt like they would, but my understanding was, and I may be wrong, was that the industry found out about this moratorium when everybody else did, yet they're the directly affected, right away with it. And maybe that's not the case, but things can give a negative impression. And I'm not gonna take back what I said unless I did say that that you guys are trying to shut them down. I didn't mean that. I didn't? Good. Okay. No apology then. He just said I didn't say it.
Okay. With no more discussion, would you please call the roll?
Red Brown,
Yes.
Barry Buchanan,
Yes.
Todd Donovan,
Yes.
Ken Mann,
Yes.
Satpal Sidhu,
Yes.
Carl Weimer,
Yes.
Barbara Brenner.
No.
That passes 6-1 with Councilmember Brenner opposed.
I think so.
I think we are going to take about a 10-minute recess, and we'll go on to our rest of our agenda.
Hey, Bob, I just became a grandparent too.
council members back in place, please? I said please.
Oh, you did. So nice. Thank you. I knew I didn't say that.
Well, Ken's like,
So we
you
should
have
take
us
the
both
credit
listening
card
to
bill.
tape.
We'll look at it.
I know, I was, actually, I was gonna ask Jill to make verbatim what I said. 'cause
Open session.
I was like, oh.
Okay, we will reconvene our meeting. Thank you all for your patience. We are going to now have our open session. So anyone that would like to come up and speak, you'll have up to 3 minutes to address the council on any issue that's relevant to county business. Before beginning your comment, please state your name and topic of interest. Again, there's the 3-minute timing. The clerk will let you know when you have 30 seconds, and she'll let you know when it's time. So we'll start over here.
Hello, my name is Bill Lafreniere. I'm a resident of Whatcom County. I would like to talk today about an idea that I have for providing additional funds needed by the Whatcom County Sheriff Department for construction of the jail and operating expenses. I call it the Donate Junk Cars for Jail program. The Sheriff's Office presently dispatches deputies tasked with checking abandoned vehicles to see if they are stolen and providing disposal paperwork at no cost to the public. When these vehicles are abandoned on private property, there may have been cost in removing them for private landowners. I would like to propose a donation program where property owners would receive a $25 property tax coupon for each vehicle donated. The vehicles would then become property of the jail program. Transport could be done by local car haulers on a rotational list maintained by the scrap company with the highest scrap bid. Scrap processors would bid on a monthly or weekly basis for vehicles. Processors would agree to dispose of hazardous fluids. Hauling fees would be a percentage of the proceeds with a set minimum amount. A special staging area would need to be made available at the jail property on the LaBounty Road in Ferndale. A sign would be posted on the road entrance advertising the donation program. This road could be used for a back entrance to the local scrap processor next door to help facilitate smoother traffic flow to that facility. A special account would be maintained by the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office to collect scrap fees, pay out hauling fees, and reimburse tax coupons. Tax coupons would be numbered and recipients recorded to prevent fraud. Coupons could be gifted to others. Balance of proceeds would go to jail construction and operations. This program would provide a much-needed dose of reality to local government on how local people have to earn their money. Thanks.
I got a question.
Yes.
What if some of those abandoned vehicles are in good enough shape to sell? Would that also be allowed with your program?
This is a donation to scrap only.
No, oh, but I mean, if they picked them up and instead of just donating for scrap, if they could get money for the vehicle from somebody who would buy it, how about that? Wouldn't that help?
I'm not sure how that would fit this program, but maybe there could be some accommodation made for resellable vehicles.
Oh, cool.
Bobby Burr.
Bobby is back, and some of you know and some of you don't. But in my past life, I was in charge of research and development for Prudential Insurance. And part of the job that we did was contingency planning for events. And I'm here tonight to ask you to begin contingency planning for the event that the jail measure will fail again, because it's essentially unchanged from the original one. I thank the three of you who voted to keep it off the ballot. That's where it should be, because it was put on before there was time to digest the full findings of the task force and the consultant who was called in. if those findings had been really listened to, what we would have on the ballot would be quite different than the one that we do have on the ballot. Let's get going now on planning alternatives to jail. Right now, as you know, we have basically what is a poor man's prison. And people who can't afford bail get stuck there until their trial gets up. You need to work with the judges of the county to make sure that nobody is denied bail because they don't have the money to make it. There's a lot of reforms that are necessary. As most of you know, I've been in that jail a couple of times, and it is a hellhole, and I want to see it changed. But the new jail has to be something that the people can vote for, particularly the people in the city of Bellingham, because they don't like the idea of the Ferndale site at all. Some say the Ferndale site was a boondoggle, that it was paid, far more was paid for it than it was worth. Others say it was sold at fair market value. Well, I propose if and when the measure fails, that you put the Ferndale property on the market, and that
30
will
seconds,
resolve
please.
the argument as to whether it was overpriced or not. We have had property values go up, so if you can't get at least what you paid for, you should sell it. Now, the last suggestion is out in left field almost, but it's right in front of our noses. There is a site that the jail could be located that would be a short shuttle ride to the county courthouse, and that is the waterfront. So I would like you to consider the waterfront as a location for the jail after this measure fails. Lynn?
Good evening, Council. Lynn Murphy with Puget Sound Energy. I hope I have some news here that will kind of brighten your evening. I'm here to express PSC's sincere appreciation for your support and your continued patience as we transition away from coal. As you may know, we do have 4 units that we partially own in Colstrip, Montana. And on September 15th, we settled with the UTC staff, a partial settlement, on the following items as we move away from our transition of coal. So the first is we were going to be setting aside some funding for the remediation and decommissioning of units 1 and 2, and that will close before or by 2022. Additionally, that funding will go towards the future closure of units 3 and 4. A date has not been set for those closures. However, we also have agreed on an accelerated depreciation of those particular units 3 and 4, meaning that now that we will have the recovered investment in those units by 2027. Again, that's not a closure date, but we will recover those investments by that time. And at that time, we can decide whether or not we can close them or continue to move on. And we're hoping that we'll be able to close them at that time. The other thing we were able to set some funds aside for was a $10 million fund for the community of Colstrip to help them in this transition away from our coal units. We're really excited about this continued transition away from coal, that we came together with the UTC, the Sierra Club, the state of Montana on this settlement. Now we're going to be waiting for the UTC commissioners to approve this particular settlement, and the funding will go into place at the first part of 2018. Again, without your support, without your patience, PSC would not have been able to do this. And again, we thank you very much. Thank you.
Ms. Brenner.
Lynn, did everybody see that thing about that working together with you and those agencies? And didn't you send that? Somebody sent it to me about PSC and different agencies and organizations and businesses in Montana came together and everybody gave and took, and I think that's what you're talking about. I saw an article about it.
Potentially, this is all a part of our general rate case, which is a requirement by the UTC that we come and we provide them. They basically do review and audit of our revenues, our budgets, operating expenses for our maintenance and basically everything we do at PSC. And other agencies are able to come in and be a part of that review. And of those entities, the Sierra Club, the state of Montana, obviously the UTC staff, and there was many, many others, too many to mention, were a part of that. That could potentially be what you're possibly
Well, I
talking
just
about.
think everybody, we all should pick her brain about how they worked that. It was an amazing, positive outcome with all these, and environmental groups and everything. I was so impressed. So.
Happy to.
She's got the attitude, the right attitude.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Kathy McDevitt again, and I have concern that began about a year ago at this time. The property next to me in Birch Bay was purchased in order to become an Airbnb, and that's a short-term rental. I guess some people might call it that. Short-term rental, vacation rental.
Oh, okay.
Airbnb is just where they're registered, but it's basically people coming and staying for a day, couple of days. The owner does not live there. The owner has never lived in the neighborhood. And I have found myself at odds with this person. In fact, they called the sheriff, and the sheriff read me the riot act, and I am no longer allowed to even pick up their garbage if it blows away. I cannot trespass on their property. And I was reprimanded for what I thought was being helpful, actually, because their guests park their cars sometimes on our very narrow road. Sunset is a road that really allows only one car at a time. We all have to be careful about not parking on that road. We all have parking spaces on our property. We know, in fact, the other evening, an emergency vehicle, 2 of them had to come for my neighbor to take him to the hospital. If one of their guests had been blocking that road, it could have been very serious. And that is the point I have tried to make again and again and again. Now, I've been told by the sheriff that it was perfectly okay to call the sheriff and have them tell the tenants, the renters, that they cannot park there. So I did. But I feel very bad about that, because these are people that come from Oregon and Idaho and Colorado and Vancouver and lots of different places, and they really don't know. And I really don't want to see them get a traffic ticket. I wanted to tell them myself. So I make signs now. If I can get their attention through the window from my property, I say, excuse me, but it is illegal to park on the road, and there is an option
30
for
seconds,
you
please.
to park on the other side. But unfortunately, the owner is not willing to allow me to do this. Also, they were burning after the all burn prohibited was posted. I had to ask them, because I don't want to burn in my bed, I had to ask them not to burn. So I feel that the owner is not really taking responsibility for the fact that this is a business and that it is not a vending machine. It is a business where people stay.
Time.
Anyone else like to speak to us during the open session? Come on up, Carol.
I know this is a bad time, but I was cheated, because how you really have standing is you tell how many grandchildren you have, and that's why you're here. Well, I want you to know that I have 21 grandchildren, and they're all in the area, and that's why I'm here. But I wanted to tell you also, please, I'm losing my train of thought. If you want to protect the health and safety of my grandchildren and your grandchildren, attack the problems that you have now. Don't base everything on fear of what might be. Make some videos of the jail and show the community. Get behind, what are you going to do if that fails? I was here when you discussed it. What about the flood control zone amount that's left there. What about, ask Mr. Wildenhauer to tell us what our taxes are going to be this next year. We've got real problems. We don't have to worry about how we're going to die with the spill or with, but anyway, I just wanted you to know that's why I'm here. Thank you.
I'm Eddie Uri again. Just really quick, just wanted to thank you all one more time for putting in these long hours, doing this hard work, hearing us all out. And I know, as it was said, it is kind of repetitive. We have been saying, having the same conversation for the last, year or two about this. And my thinking is that this is probably the last time we pass this ordinance as written, and that within 6 months we'll be looking at some new measures, possibly some more permanent measures, once the tools from the legal study and the evaluation recommendation there is on the table. And I look forward to working with you and engaging all the stakeholders here and figuring out just what the right thing to do is. And thankful to see that in the meantime we're not going to have some new permit applications get on the books and put us at a multi-year EIS review process for something that takes up a lot of time. So glad to see these responsible decisions are being made. I also just wanted to highlight, and I think some of you you're probably aware, you're not the only municipal body in Washington that's going through the exact same or very similar processes. The city of Tacoma and the port of Tacoma, in a joint process, are doing very similar, looking to do very similar work to what the effect of our moratorium is, through an interim ordinance in place while they go through a sub-area planning process for the Tacoma tide flats, which also includes the U.S. oil refinery and other shipping industries. They're looking to do the exact same thing. And they have language at their planning commission, and then their city council is looking to approve. Having the same conversation down there, and I highly recommend connecting with officials there and finding out where does it overlap, or what are we looking at, what can we learn from each other. Likewise, I know there's folks at City of Anacortes and Skagit County interested in doing something very similar and are also very concerned about crude oil export down there. I know the USW refinery workers down there are very concerned about it. And of course, the city of Portland adopted an ordinance that, they're currently, they're in an appeal case over it. But it had a very similar effect to what we're trying to do. So I just say, I know that there's a lot of folks that are looking, whatever the results of this study is, it's not going to be useful just to Whatcom County. It's going to be valuable to the entire Northwest region, and particularly the Puget Sound. So, yeah, I just encourage you all to connect, and I can help if I can facilitate that, to connect with other elected officials, other parts of the state. And yeah, with that, thank you, and I'll let you hope to finish the business, get on tonight. Thanks.
Thanks. Anyone else like to speak during the open session? Okay, we will close it and go to the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, the Whatcom County Finance and Administrative Services Committee met today. We considered 2 items on the consent agenda. These both received unanimous approval, and I so move.
Okay, we have that motion in front of us. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. We will now move to natural resources.
Mr. Chair, we had, this is 2 items that the committee, first, a resolution requesting the county executive develop a special funding district to fund water quality improvements in the unincorporated Lake Whatcom watershed. There was a committee recommendation of 3-0 for that to go to the council.
Okay.
And we had we're gonna do that one first? Or? We're not doing reports, we're doing, or we just, do you want to just?
You just moved the resolution, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, we have a motion from Natural Resources to approve this resolution. Discussion? Ms. Brenner?
Just because I want to keep it on the public record, I do support a special funding district, but I do not support charging anybody who's not contributing to the problem and passing it along to everybody the same. I think the people who have the runoff should be doing the paying, and the people who don't shouldn't have to pay. So that's all. That didn't happen when we, the reason I'm doing this is we did the Birch Bay one, and I really liked the idea of the Birch Bay, BB Warm, Birch Bay watershed, whatever it is. But they did that thing where they just flat taxed everybody, and I don't think that that's fair.
Mr. Donovan?
Yeah, I'll just put a little more background on this. The resolution is asking the executive to either look at a sub-flood control zone or a stormwater utility type model. So we have something in place in the future that might be able to fund stormwater, water quality things for Lake Whatcom. It does not actually make any decisions about what the fee structures will be or how that's going to work. So it's getting the institution in place.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 7-0.
We had a second item, a resolution affirming the PDR Oversight Committee's rankings of applications and authorizing the Whatcom County Purchase of Development Rights Administrator and Whatcom County Executive to proceed with the acquisition of conservation easements on applications ranked number 1 through 6 in a presentation that was given us earlier today by staff, and that would involve, well, that was recommended by the committee 3-0, so move
Okay, we
approval
have
of that.
that motion affirming the PDR Oversight Committee's ranking. Do we have any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes 7-0. Back to administration or finance.
Mr. Chair, the next item is an ordinance amending the 2017 Whatcom County budget, 11th request in the amount of $34,028. This received unanimous approval, and I so move.
Okay, do we have any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Barry Buchanan?
Yes.
Todd Donovan?
Yes.
Ken Mann?
Yes.
Satpal Sidhu?
Yes.
Carl Weimer?
Yes.
Barbara Brenner?
Yes.
Red Brown?
Yes.
That passes 7-0.
Mr. Chair, the next item is an ordinance closing the South Pass Road / Sar Creek Bridge number 212, Fund Project number 370. This received unanimous approval, and I so move.
We have any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Todd Donovan?
Yes.
Ken Mann?
Yes.
Satpal Sidhu?
Yes.
Carl Weimer?
Yes.
Barbara Brenner?
Yes.
Red Brown?
Yes.
Barry Buchanan?
Yes. That passes 7-0.
Mr. Chair, the next item is an ordinance closing the Slater intersections, Imhoff and Ferndale Roads Project Fund 349. This received unanimous approval, and I so move.
Okay, we have that motion before us. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ken Mann?
Yes.
Satpal Sidhu?
Yes.
Carl Weimer?
Yes.
Barbara Brenner?
Yes.
Red Brown?
Yes.
Barry Buchanan?
Yes.
Todd Donovan?
Yes.
That passes 7-0.
Mr. Chair, the next item is an ordinance closing the Birch Bay Linden Road / Portal Way Signalisation Improvements Project Fund 341. This received unanimous approval, and I so move.
Discussion on this motion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Satpal Sidhu?
Yes.
Carl Weimer?
Yes.
Barbara Brenner?
Yes.
Red Brown?
Yes.
Barry Buchanan?
Yes.
Todd Donovan?
Yes.
Ken Mann?
Yes.
That passes 7-0.
Mr. Chair, the next item is an ordinance closing the Dakota Creek Bridge number 500 Project Fund 350. This received unanimous approval, and I so move.
Discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Carl Weimer?
Yes.
Barbara Brenner?
Yes.
Red Brown?
Yes.
Barry Buchanan?
Yes.
Todd Donovan?
Yes.
Ken Mann?
Yes.
Satpal Sidhu?
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair, the next item is an ordinance closing the Hannigan Road / Nooksack River Bridge number 252 Project Fund 353, and this received unanimous approval, and I so move.
Discussion on this motion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Barbara Brenner?
Yes.
Red Brown?
Yes.
Barry Buchanan?
Yes.
Todd Donovan?
Yep.
Ken Mann?
Yes.
Satpal Sidhu?
Yes.
Carl Weimer?
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair, the next item is request authorization of the county executive to enter into contract between Whatcom County and Washington State Department of Ecology to provide a 6-person crew to perform habitat restoration and water quality work for public works in the amount of $76,000. In this case, the council is acting as the Whatcom County Flood Control Zone District Board of Supervisors. This received unanimous approval, and I so move.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes 7-0.
Mr. Chair, the next item is request authorization for the county executive to enter into a joint funding agreement between Whatcom County and the United States Geological Survey for the ongoing operation and maintenance of the county's 6 stream gauges within the Nooksack River early flood warning system, plus stream gauges at the Nooksack River, Everson Overflow, and Jones Creek in Acme for early warning and flood response in the amount of $113,720. In this case, the council is also acting as the Whatcom County Flood Control Zone District Board of Supervisors. It's received unanimous approval, and I so move.
Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This passes 7-0.
Mr. Chair, there was nothing else from Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Next is Public Works, Health, and Safety Committee. Ms. Brenner.
Okay, we had 2 resolutions for us, and I'm going to go by them individually, but I just want to make sure this is clarified again. It can't be clarified too many times. We are required by law to do this, and it's kind of weird because this isn't, you know, it's its own district, so I don't feel comfortable, but it's the law. Resolution accepting the assessment role of property within the boundaries of Whatcom County Road Improvement District 7, Emerald Lake Lighting District, and setting October 24th, 2017 as the date for public hearing. It came through with a unanimous vote, 3-0, and I move it.
Okay, any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 7-0.
I do have a question. Just, what would happen if we didn't do this? Would we be?
The lights go out, yeah.
Well, so, I mean, could we be like prosecuted or something if we didn't do this?
Yeah.
Jack's saying yes and John's saying no.
Just Barbara.
Whatever, okay.
You'd have fun prosecuting Barbara. Well, that's...
And then the last resolution, accepting the assessment of role of property within boundaries of Whatcom County Road Improvement District 1, Birch Bay Lighting District, and setting October 24th, 2017 as the date for public hearing. This came through with unanimous approval in committee, and I so move.
Okay, any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 7-0. The next item does not have a committee assignment. It's a request from the Whatcom County Health Department for council to authorize the North Sound Behavioral Health Organization binding letter of intent for our region to become a mid-adopter with the option for a transitional year, which is 2019, and full integration by 2020. Do I have a motion to?
I move approval.
Did you want to say anything, Regina, before we
Poor
vote?
Regina sat here all night for this one.
Yeah.
So Regina Delahunt, Public Health Director. We had quite a lengthy discussion about this 2 weeks ago at the Public Works, Health and Safety Committee. And since that time, that was I think on September 12th, and then on September 14th, the Behavioral Health Organization met and voted as to whether to formally recommend back to each of the counties to support this. And they recommended the support of the mid-adopter with the transitional year. And there were also 3 conditions that they wanted to include in the letter that we would send to the Healthcare Authority. And those are in your packet. So I recommend that we support mid-adopter status.
Ms. Brenner?
Since you're here, did all the other counties already do it, or what is it?
No, Snohomish has voted and they've approved it. At the September 14th meeting of the BHO, the vote was 7-2. So Skagit commissioner voted no, and San Juan voted no.
So we can't do it unless it's unanimous,
Well,
right?
but their councils still need to, their commissioners as the body have to vote.
Right.
And then I believe Skagit took it back to their commissioners, and the commissioners decided not to take a vote on it on that day, to go back and think about it some more and come back. So there still might be the possibility of 5 counties voting, so we'll see. Yeah, the next meeting will be next week. The Behavioral Health Organization will be meeting again, so we'll see from there.
When's Skagit going to vote again?
I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be before next week or not. So,
It'd be nice to know before our meeting.
yeah, it would be. So
Okay.
that's the update.
Thank you.
Okay.
We had a motion. Did we get a second?
Second.
We did now. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes 7-0. Next, we have a resolution setting Whatcom County Council meeting dates for 2018. Do we have a motion to approve, Ms. Brenner?
Not for me.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
I have a question. I think we should have.
First and third, second and fourth. I don't like the way we do it because I even don't know when we have meetings and a lot of people say that they don't either. So Dana did an incredible job of trying to convince me about the efficiency of this. But I'm sticking to my guns.
So does this mean that the new council members are sworn in on the 16th? Oh, really?
I believe it's the 8th.
What'd you say?
I was just, the 8th, she said a week before. 'Cause
It's the
I really want
second
to attend
Monday
that.
of the year.
You want to abstain?
I want to attend that
Oh.
swearing-in ceremonies.
Oh. I think
Okay.
Carl has something to say.
Yes, Mr. Weimer.
Yeah, Ken and I really think that the council should start meeting weekly, starting in 2018.
Wonderful.
We used to. We used to meet weekly.
7 a.m. on
I'd
Sunday
support
mornings, is
that.
that your plan?
I would. We got more stuff now than we used to have.
Okay, any further discussion on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Passes 6-1 with Councilmember Brenner opposed.
And I'd like to propose that Mr. Weimer and Mr. Mann are required to serve on any unfilled
Boards and commissions.
boards and commissions for the term of the natural life.
Moving right
Appoint me to
along.
anything you want.
Next item. Oh, yeah.
That's a good segue because we are now at council appointments to boards, commissions, and committees.
And Nancy's been
We have an
sitting on it.
appointment to the Lummi Island Ferry Advisory Committee as a resident or property owner on Lummi Island. The applicant is Beth Wallakus Lewis. Do I have a motion to appoint?
I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
So does Nancy want to say?
Seeing
You're
none,
so
all those in favor
sweet.
say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 7-0. Nancy, thanks for hanging with us.
Yeah.
Gosh, that was really something.
It always is.
You know, we have
No, I
a
mean,
live YouTube channel, right? We have a live YouTube channel. You can watch it from home.
But we wouldn't have been able to
Yeah,
see
so for the channel.
Oh, we appreciate you being
Nancy
here.
sat through this whole meeting.
it. We wouldn't have been able to see them.
Good night.
Okay, we'll move on to introduction items. Please note that item number 2 has been withdrawn. Has everybody got that?
I did not.
Yeah.
I would entertain a motion to introduce
I so
items
move.
1
Oh.
and then 3 through 7.
I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 7-0.
I would have been surprised if they could.
Other information from committees, natural resources?
I was just, there's another thing in our packet for boards and commissions, but open space
I
advisory
think
committee.
that's,
That was full.
yeah,
That's introduction.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
introduction. I knew I saw it, but it.
Natural Resource Committee, we covered the two things. Yeah, we had the discussion of the ordinance that was introduced tonight and just approved for county code. Did we? That will be introduced. We had the discussion with Public Works about potential funding sources for Lake Whatcom, which was related to the thing that we just adopted to set up the funding district. And we had the presentation on the PDR purchases and the grant funding for that, which we also just voted on, so kind of dealt with it all.
Okay, that's it. Finance, did you have anything else?
We had two things. We had a presentation from the Whatcom County Information and Technology Department, provided their semi-annual report on IT. We're spending a lot of money, and I think we're getting a lot of value. So And the next thing we had was a presentation by Bruce Harris Associates on the proposed contract which we approved tonight regarding the conversion of our county assessors maps from Mylar. And for those of you under 40, that's a plastic film that they then use a ruler and a ink pen on, which is how we've tracked our parcel maps. And it's going to be, wait for the drum roll, it's going to be converted into a GIS system. Brings us in line with probably every other jurisdiction in the nation. So you can tell I'm excited.
Yeah, you are. Calm down there.
Yeah. And
Okay.
there's something else.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
wanna
Brown. Yes.
comment. I just wanted to say, for the administration, I was ready not to support that amount, and then that guy did a great presentation. I had no idea it was so, these people are so rare, or these companies are so rare. I thought we could get somebody local to do it. No, yeah. So it was a good presentation.
Okay, this afternoon, we had a special, we had a committee of the whole meeting. We had discussion with Special Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Rod Brown regarding legal ways the county may reduce the impacts on the county from increased fossil fuel exports from the Cherry Point UGA. This discussion took place in executive session under the potential litigation portion of that, and there was no action taken.
That was Rod Brown, no relation to Rod Brown.
No relation to Rudd Brown.
Yes. Thank you.
So, back to Public Works?
That was all we had, were those two things.
Are you sure?
Those, yeah, I was in and out of there in like
Oh, that's right.
3
you were.
minutes.
Yes. Okay, so then planning.
We had a presentation from Sam Ryan, Director of Planning and Development Services, on the semi-annual report, letting us know what was going on out at PDS, and there was a lot going on out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we had another special committee of the whole meeting in which we completed the work on the critical areas ordinance. That ordinance will be introduced in 2 weeks, and then there will be a public hearing on it 2 weeks after that. So, yes, Ms. Brenner.
The work was completed on the draft. It's not done. I mean, you
Well,
know. Okay. I just want to make sure everybody understands that we can make changes still.
We'll move to other items. I have one. I've been talking to, apparently several of us have been talking to some folks on the Bellingham City Council on the really emergency situation we have in our county with regard to homelessness. So what I want to do is to bring forth a resolution, working with Mr. Donovan and Mr. Brown and some of the folks across the street in Bellingham and our health department, to bring forth a resolution to put together a work group to deal with Whatcom County homelessness, looking at things like low barrier shelters and other programs that we could institute to help bring some solutions to this problem. So I just kind of wanted to give everybody a heads up that you'll see something in the packet for our next meeting. Mr. Brown.
I just wanted to thank Barry and Todd's dedication to this issue. I know it's something that both have been working on hard, so thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brenner.
That almost seems an appropriate thing to put on the agenda for the health board meeting. We've got a health board meeting.
Next week.
Oh.
Too
and
quick.
It's too quick?
Yeah.
We can't do it if
We could talk about it, but I don't think we'll have it done.
Oh, because I mean, that would fit right in with what we're dealing with.
That's a good venue.
So we have to do 2 weeks before we talk. It's just a thing. It's not like an ordinance or
I
something.
think Barry said it wouldn't be ready by
It's
next
just, we
week.
got to discuss what the makeup looks like, and there's some things to talk about.
Yeah, but wouldn't that committee be a good place to do
It
that?
would if it was not 1 week from today,
Why?
because it doesn't give us enough time to work on it.
Oh, okay. I thought because
trying to
there's
figure
some
out.
legal reason.
No legal reason.
Okay.
Yes, Mr.
I was going to just bring it up for Dana as well, that the Business Advisory Committee we worked on, we should bring it back to the council for finalization of that, or schedule it somewhere. Okay.
You got any, let's go this way, any other items of business?
No, I'm fine.
Forgive me, you were talking about bringing the Business Advisory Committee back?
Yeah, like we never did the final approval of that.
No, I think probably the most productive thing there is just to check back in, maybe the two of us can check back in with the Port of Bellingham, because we've been working with on partnership with them, and you just reminded me they've never given us formal feedback on that proposal.
Yeah, I mean, you know, maybe you should
Yeah,
push them a little bit
No,
to give us their feedback so that we can finalize it.
Yeah, no, I'll ask the port and say,
Okay.
give us some feedback.
Okay.
I will say, sorry, if I can report on one other thing. There's the discussions related to changing and updating our economic strategy, and particularly the structure of the Associate Development Organisation, which is, as you know, is the organisation tasked with leading economic development in the county. That discussion with the Port of Bellingham has led to them being in a shortlist now for people to lead that, and we met with a couple of applicants. Very pleased with the quality of the applicants that we've got, so I'd just like to give a shout out for them. They're doing their bit and moving forward on that, and I think we'll all be pleased in the direction it's going.
Yeah,
Mr. Sedillo.
I was going to add something to that, is that's ADO is one part of that, but providing, one of the other objective of that committee was to provide a channel for the business community to be able to connect with the council.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that the ADO, yes, it's a very important function, and I really want this business advisory committee to have input into that as well. But at the same time, we need to create that channel of communication. That's something I've been talking to some of the business people, and they've been saying that is a welcome step, that there's a direct channel of communication rather than through other organizations.
Right. And in the discussions with the applicants on the shortlist, it was good to see that the port was making it clear that there would be a hard reporting line to the port, but there'd be a dotted line reporting line to the members of the Business Advisory Committee. So,
sure.
Not only will we have the input for them, but they'll actually have some, some resources to actually affect policy.
Definitely.
Mr. Mann?
The Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force released its nearly final draft report yesterday. I don't know if that's online yet, but it will be, and it's a great report by our consultants that we've been working with them on for a number of months, so I hope everyone reads it, and we'll get that finalized probably in about a month or so, and they'll be out here for a half-day presentation of their report and their recommendations for how we could reduce incarceration, and they've also agreed to give a presentation, a much shorter presentation, to the City Council as well, so I'm appreciative of their efforts.
When will that be?
I think it's October 23rd, yes, October 23rd is a Monday, and it'll be a 8:30 to 12:30 over in the Civic Center building in the Garden Room. If you want to get the full 4-hour presentation and discussion, and I know it's going to be, I think, in what they call the Law and Justice Committee at the City Council in the afternoon at some point.
Mr. Weimer, anything? Nope. Any council member updates for anyone?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just hope to be excused from the health board meeting next Tuesday. I'm going to be in Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Congratulations.
Telling them they should do it like we do it here.
No, I'm good.
Mr. Brown?
Nope.
Nope.
I have one. This weekend was Sea Feast, where they do an oyster slurp that Councilmember Weimer somehow got me looped into. Michael Lilliquist was the defending champion. He no longer is. I'm co-champion with Bobby Briscoe. It was a tie. I thought I had him. But the main point is Michael Lilliquist is no longer the defending champion. It was fun. It was a really good
Hoping
event.
you liked oysters.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how fast the shucker's going. 'cause
Yeah.
How many did you get?
I could have eaten tons more when I did it.
16.
16?
Yeah, about twice what John Hutchins got. He's not
Yeah,
here.
Pete's not.
Oh,
I was going to say, how much did you have to eat to become the
tell
champion?
John. Beat him out.
I got another question, but I'll ask it later.
I had more afterwards.
Mr. Sadoo, you got anything?
No, I'm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for all your patience. And the Perrys are still here. Good night.
Good night.
We're adjourned.
Hey, Barbara.